Time being 6:30, we call the Ashland Planning Board meeting to order. All could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag is directly behind us. Senator, would you like to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Donna.
Here.
Bethany.
Here.
What? Yeah, Tricia.
Present.
Linda.
Present.
Paula.
Present.
Mardine.
Present.
Chris.
Here.
I am Kendall Hughes. I am also here, and the land use secretary is Jane, who is sitting behind me. All right. First order of business is the minutes of the November meeting. Do we have
Yes.
any changes for those?
There's a couple corrections. Line 22, you did not appoint me, you appointed Donna as the voting member. I came in because she had to abstain.
She can't hear you. This setup's kind of
Donna was the voting member, I was not.
weird. Line 22.
I'll make the change.
We have changes in writing for you.
Yeah, I wrote it down. Do you want them?
No, that's
No, go ahead and read them.
Line 30 is redundant.
30. Redundant.
On line 47,
Page 2,
page 3.
page 3,
Line 47.
page 3.
Yep. I was under the impression that I'm not gonna say this word right, so I'm not even gonna try, the reclamation process goes into, it says it goes into what depth and extent. I thought it did not. And I don't know if anybody can.
What
yay or
number is
nay.
it?
47.
Number 47 on page 3.
Yeah, that's right, Bethany. You're correct.
So it does not go into what
Correct.
depth or extent.
Correct.
So how should it read? The reclamation
Does not go.
does not.
On page 5, 38 is redundant. It's mentioned in line 22.
Repeat again. I didn't-
Line 38, there will be additional food service costs. It's redundant. It's mentioned in 22, line 22, so it could just be removed.
Got it.
On that same page, line 47, I believe it was mentioned that the Ledgewood development originally contained working households. I could be incorrect on that, but it just says contains working
Yes,
households.
originally.
So it's originally, it should read that it originally contains working households.
Yep. Got it.
Page 7. This is where I think I got confused where I was voting. Everybody had to abstain, and for there to be a quorum, I had to vote the minutes or second the minutes. So I don't know if that just wants to be mentioned on line 6. I'm sorry.
View the minutes.
So on line 6, I seconded the motion. I did, but I don't know if we want to put a little thing in
Yes.
there that I had to make quorum because I was
Right,
the only one
Bethany
there.
was elevated for quorum.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, on that same page, line 18 is redundant because line 17 is redundant because in 16 we talk about zoning ordinances, of which the compact zone is one.
17 is redundant.
Yeah, and I just felt that was because we're going over the zoning ordinances and regulations will need to be addressed in 2025, and then of the zoning ordinances, obviously the compact zone is one, but I know that it's an important, so I didn't know if we wanted to keep it pulled out. That was just something that.
I got it.
I'm sorry, so are we taking out 17?
I was just
If we
saying
do,
that it was,
it should say Q2 of 2025, just so we're clear, because we talked about, we know it's a pressing need and we will address it as soon as possible, but we don't have the capacity to do it in Q1 with the
Yeah.
other amendments. Okay.
So I take it out,
You can take it out altogether.
take out 17.
Yeah.
Okay,
and that was all I had.
I took it out.
Yeah, well, I have a couple of comments.
Yes,
Tom Newton's name does not have an E on the end on the first page.
Can you give, say the line, it would help her.
Oh, sorry, 19,
Page 1,
page 119.
NEWCOMB.
Yes, that's been drawn to my attention. I will make sure that it gets
Perfect.
changed.
And then Schamberger too would be Schamberger, which is on page 7, lines 22 and 23.
Yes, I got that as well, and that will appear.
The only other question I had, which I wasn't at the meeting, so I'm not sure I understand, but is it on page 3, line 29? It talks about the termination of water and sewer. Is it termination or the terminus? I mean, why would you terminate water and sewer?
so it is termination, it's where it terminates within the development,
Okay. So
the end of it in the
Okay,
development.
perfect, thanks.
I apologize. I did have one more, and it was just for my understanding. I'm sorry, you're done.
Yeah, I am, thank you.
On page 1, where it's on 42, where it says to create a site plan drawing including the location of the brewery and the extent of the proposed renovations, I thought that had already been approved.
No,
Okay.
so what had been approved was vastly different than what they are proposing.
Okay.
So they will need to do a whole new
Okay.
thing.
Can we clarify that
Sure. How
somewhere?
do you want to clarify it?
To create a revised site plan?
It's a whole new site plan, it's not, there's no revision to it.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
No, I know, but it was just because it mentioned the location of the brewery and the extent of the proposed renovation.
right, so on 42, if we can add, that they will need to provide a new site plan drawing indicating the location of the brewery and the extent of the proposed renovations.
Right. New
Because
site
it's
plan.
vastly different,
Is it a new location of the brewery?
kind of, sort of.
Okay, so provide a new site plan drawing, and then you want the rest of the sentence, is
Yeah,
that
it's
correct?
more the reservation, the renovations that are the concern.
Okay,
Thank you, Paul.
all right.
I think Linda
I
has
have some
some.
notes, yeah. On page 6, on line 33, that's fine, the planning board recommended that the lower limit of ADUs be 750 square feet, upper limit of no greater than 1,000. But on 35, it currently says it was finally decided there would be no lower limit of detached ADUs. My understanding is
No.
we
That's right,
agreed
that's right.
That is
whole
incorrect.
sentence should come out because we agreed only on attached ADUs and we agreed on a lower limit. So the whole part, it was finally decided that there would be no lower limit on detached ADUs. That whole sentence should come out.
It's
And
out.
then- Yeah, and then ADUs smaller would need to go to the ZBA for a variance. We did agree to that.
Yep.
Again, 37, did we say, first of all, we need to take out detached, the word detached. But do we need to say needs to meet all life safety requirements?
We should.
Okay.
Yes,
So then just take out the word detached.
I did that.
Then in 38, I don't believe we discussed workforce ADUs.
That's right,
So I think that 38 should just be
ADUs.
removed, just either that or, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
ADUs.
take it
The
out,
entire
Take it
line
out
can be
altogether.
removed.
because it can't be used. as-
Yeah, and then 39 and 40, I think are redundant
Yes.
because those were points for discussion, but they weren't what we ended up agreeing to.
They're gone.
Okay? So just strike 39 and 40.
Got it,
Thank you.
done.
Kendall,
Yes, ma'am.
I have one question, comment. On page 6,
Yep,
line 18, that says the December 25th, 2024 meeting has been canceled. There was not one scheduled for that anyway. The
Correct.
schedule on the website had it originally for December 18th.
right.
Yeah.
That is correct. It doesn't need to say,
That one comes out.
yeah.
And the January 1st should come out too?
No,
Okay,
no, there's no schedule yet for 25.
okay. It's out.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I do have one other thing. Page 7, the Taylor Shamburger, is it Shamburger, S-H-A-M?
Yes.
Okay. Could we please put an address or lot number on that?
When I checked with the town office, they couldn't give me a lot number.
Wow.
Is there
Which
any way to
is
describe?
why I didn't.
Okay, is there any way to describe where this is? Because when I looked
Well,
up,
it said it was on Hicks Road.
They have not submitted anything yet. They just came in and for an informational.
Okay.
And she is not the owner of the property.
could we then put in the current owner of
Yeah,
the
we
property?
need
Just
to-
so,
yeah.
looking back, we can at least identify what we're talking about.
Correct.
If there's, yeah.
Okay, so you want the current owner?
If we can somehow identify, find out who the current owner is, and if not putting the current owner name in, at least put the lot number in, once we
TML.
figure that out.
Okay. And should I put in a location as well?
I'll see if I can find it for you, Tom.
Yeah.
I'll just make a note here. I'll check with you, Jane.
Okay, I'll be there tomorrow.
Yes, I'll check in, I'll check with you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
God, Paul, that was a long meeting.
Yeah, it was. Kudos to you. Buckle in for this one.
Yeah, hold on just a second.
He's trying to find
Yeah, I'm
out.
trying to find it. They own 5 different properties, so I'm not sure which one it is. So we'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
It's this one. Yeah. So I'm not sure which one it is. All right. Anything else on the minutes?
No, nothing.
Okay. Do I have a motion on the minutes?
I motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Okay, I have a motion to accept the minutes as amended. Do I have a second?
I think it would have
I
to be you.
I will second that motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those abstaining,
Abstain.
Chris?
Abstain.
and
Mardine.
Mardine.
Yeah.
Motion passes with 2 abstentions. 3-4, 2 abstentions. Okay. Where do we want to go from here? Tricia, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think we're going to move into the Mill Pond development.
We are,
Yes.
yes.
Wanted to confirm that you all received the report from Brown Engineering.
Yesterday, yep.
Did you have a chance to look over any of that?
We looked at, an overview, yeah,
Okay,
of course.
okay. So I mean, up to you, but we'd like to maybe think about how we can talk through some of these points. Mario met with us last week and
Right.
called out some points that he thought that we should address with you before moving forward into anything else tonight.
And then,
Well, I think that we need to start by opening a public, we're having a general conversation right now. We should be opening a discussion about one application and then the other, one at a time.
so
I think.
I would like to see a written response to these 17 pages of concerns.
That's absolutely standard operating procedure. We
Yep.
will absolutely be doing that. Yep.
Okay, so we will expect that from you.
Okay.
And 2 weeks before the meeting that we're going to be talking at, and we're going to try to get everything 2 weeks, back and forth between both of us.
Okay,
Okay?
no problem.
All
I
right.
guess, while we're on this subject,
Yeah.
these applications, we were here a while back, and they were continued to tonight. So I don't believe it's proper practice, and I'm not an attorney, so but it's not proper practice for the board to be meeting on our applications to a meeting that wasn't, when we were told that we were being continued to tonight. And it sounds like you met a week or two ago without our knowledge, talking about our applications, which I don't think is proper procedure. And
Continue?
No.
Yeah, it was not continued to tonight.
it absolutely was.
Yeah, it was.
It absolutely was.
Okay.
Yes.
It absolutely was.
Okay.
So why can't they speak with the town's engineer that they hired?
They can interact with him, but not at a public hearing. We weren't attending our application.
So
Ta-
you had sent all the information to him. We needed the information for tonight's meeting.
Of course.
And it's been stated that all of our meetings are open and you're welcome to attend.
We were not noticed.
We were not noticed.
There are no notices that are given,
We were not.
You told
no
us to be here
further
tonight.
notices.
You told us to be here tonight. We will continue tonight.
Yeah.
I think you broke procedure, and we'll,
We'll
I should
have
put you on
to
notice about
disagree
that.
on that.
okay, that's fair enough.
The only thing
he did was go over
He went over
what
the
you guys have
points.
submitted to him for his
Doesn't
review.
matter. It doesn't matter.
So,
We will continue tonight, and anytime where our application is being spoken about, we should be able to be there. And we were told.
you are welcome to be at
We were
all of
told
our
to be here
meetings.
tonight.
Yep.
Okay.
posted on the website.
I,
Yeah.
may I ask, and I was not at the meeting also, but did the agenda that was posted say that Mr. Focaretto would be there at the meeting to discuss his,
I do believe it did. I
It was
don't
not.
have
then
it
they
with
should
me.
have been
Because I
notified.
didn't know he was gonna be.
Okay,
They should have been told,
okay.
I think.
So noted. So what do you have for us tonight?
Well, we were at a meeting where we weren't allowed to speak at the acceptance meeting, so we have a presentation for you tonight for the two applications. We have our environmental engineer here and our traffic engineer here, so we want to make sure that both of those individuals get an opportunity to speak. Those are both professionals you guys have had a lot of questions about, and wanted to have more information about. So we have them here tonight to be able to kind of do a presentation about where they're at and some questions and answers, and go from there. Obviously, we just received that letter. We haven't prepared any revisions to the plans.
We only just received it yesterday as well.
Fair enough. We will be working on a comprehensive response with a written reply. Some of that stuff in there is not something that just happens overnight, for instance, a water impact study or something like that. So we're just going to have to be working through it, kind of, basically. So my suggestion is that we open one application and
We are going to consider both applications together is what we've been advised to do.
I
So-
don't think you can do that either. These are separate applications filed separately. The subdivision can happen without the site plan. The subdivision can be approved without the site plan. They are separate applications. They have some interconnectivity and the idea that we're discussing kind of together makes sense, but I think we should be processing them one at a time.
You can start your presentation if you'd like.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Kevin Leonard from North Point Engineering, just for the record. We've been working on Bill Ponder for a while. I wanted to provide a couple updates. On 11/21, we resubmitted plans. It's worth noting that the recent Brown review was performed on the original submission from September. And so they're reviewing kind of outdated plans from our office, but sort of with a time lapse and whatnot. That's how it worked out. I just want to point that out. On 11/21, we deliberately submitted those 11/21 plans to all department heads because you advised us that you wanted department heads to be weighing in on the applications. So we made sure we deliberately got the current plans to each of those individuals with a letter requesting a written response. I don't know whether that written response would come to us directly or through the land use department or whatnot. We understand that to date, no responses have been provided. Is that correct, Jane?
I'm sorry, say that again.
There's no written department head responses to date.
Correct.
I also understand what,
How did you submit it to the department heads?
how did we speak to department heads? We brought up the town hall with the same package we gave the land use department and we gave Brown Engineering. We gave them a copy of the plans with a cover letter to their attention.
Okay.
So it was, my understanding, they got basically put in their mailbox. Is that right?
Yeah, the lady at the office, I have her signed, and stamped received on every single one that she was giving them out to each department head, as instead of me driving to the police station, the fire station, and every other department, she put them in their mailboxes.
And it explained what you were looking for?
Say it again?
It explained why they were getting them.
Correct. There's a letter of transmittal that explains to each one with a set of plans and a letter of transmittal.
There was a cover letter that basically said, as you may or may not know, these are applications that are being submitted on this piece of land by ORCD. The planning board has asked for you to comment on, so there was a narrative. I mean, this project isn't a surprise to any of them. A year ago, we had a design review process. They're familiar with the project. We weren't sure locally what the process was to make sure that was happening, and so it was sort of our initiative to make sure they got the current stuff. And I guess one of the questions we have is what should be our expected timeline for getting responses from them. I did note that Kent Mario said in his review letter that he met with, I believe, sewer and water and fire directly, and he said, it sort of suggested that he incorporated some of their comments into his letter. And I can kind of read through, I can see where there's some specific, water-related comments or fire department-related comments that are incorporated in, which presumably came from those department heads. So I just want to outline those things that have happened. The other thing that's happened since, between the original submission and the 11/21 submission is that we did supplemental survey. I had mentioned a while back that we had a pre-application meeting with DES, with Wetlands Bureau and whatnot, and they identified more detail. They wanted along Mill Pond, and internally we knew that we needed more detail at the proposed wetland crossing within the development. Surveyors tend to map up to find the wetlands, and they don't always get a lot of detail in the wetland itself. And so we made them go back there and get detailed topography and whatnot at the crossing so that we could be setting the culvert properly and that sort of thing. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that Kara worked to track down the current owner of the dam, and we had a conference call with him last week. It's a number of people that own the dam, but Aaron Solisti, I may have not said his name correctly. But we met with him, and he has a couple concerns. He's mostly concerned about having the ability to get equipment in to do work at the dam. So we're going to make some accommodations, which I'll point out as we go through kind of the plans. He's also looking to have the ability, he doesn't know if he ever would, but he'd have the ability to tie into water and sewer. So as part of our plans, we'll stub some stuff to him so that down the road, if he had a reason to want to connect to either one of those, he'd have a place to do that. He also raised the valid point that on our demolition, our removals plans, we are removing the existing, the yellow easement here, which is the easement that property benefits from Winter Street around the pond over the dam. On our removal plans, we're eliminating that with the intention to put one back over, from the end of Mill Pond Lane all the way over our drives to his property, and to date, the plans don't show that. That's something that we need to get added to the plans. So those are all things that we're prepared to do, and we're going to make some accommodations to address his concerns.
So his vehicles will drive through the 76 unit development, or it's just past the habitat?
I'll show that when we get there, but yes, it'll drive, his access will come off of Mill Pond Lane onto what we're calling our Center Units Drive, and then onto the Southern Units Drive, and then we're building a designated dam access drive from basically our loop down to his property.
And my understanding is he's gonna be having tractor trailer trucks that come and go from there?
That was his original sort of commentary, but the reality is he just wants to be able to get a crane in there. The police department also, fire department wants to be able to get a fire truck over there, so we're gonna look at that. And he wants to be able to back up there with like a little bit of something to be able to drop off an excavator or something like that. Which makes sense, if he's trying to work on his property, he wants to be able to get that kind of equipment in there. So we're gonna make revisions to the plans to address his needs.
My concern was it going past the 76 unit development where there's gonna be children. If you have a lot of heavy equipment going in there, that's,
This is like a once in a blue moon construction project. This isn't a regular occurrence. It's not part of his operation. It's part of potential improvements he might make there. He doesn't even know that he will or won't need this, but it'll be, you know, the property benefits from the easement today. The proposed condition is going to be a great improvement. It's going to be wider, paved, and so on. We'll make sure he has a new easement that properly connects the dots from one thing to the other, and we'll, I'll point that out when we get to the site plan.
Okay.
But we're going to make some revisions to better accommodate his needs. So those are just a couple of the updates I was generally wanted to just, before I dove in, just kind of bring you up to speed. So, I'm going to get a little bit of a projector. This is map 110, lot 73. I want to inform the board that as part of this additional survey work that was done, did more detailed survey around the pond. The property boundary of the along the pond is defined at the pond's edge, which is a kind of a fuzzy thing. It's, you know, and you look at these old deeds, it's like they were describing the area of the property based on the edge of the pond, and that, you know, that could vary, depends on the what's going on with the dam. As part of the work that we did recently, the surveyor did recently, we did detailed work to identify the reference line, which is the top of bank, which is typically above the wetland line. So the wetland line is a jurisdictional line from a sort of plants and water standpoint of view. But on water bodies like this, the jurisdictional line for permitting is the top of bank. And so, and we didn't really have that, they didn't have the detail along Mill Pond to define the top of bank. So we've now gotten that detail and added that detail to the plan. So we have a top of bank line, which is also by definition the reference line, which is the point of which the shoreline starts from. So 250 feet from that reference line is the protected shoreline. But the long and short of it is that when the surveyor is calling the reference line, which is a kind of new line with detailed survey work, as the property line, and so he's reducing the area of the tract. The tract is now 27.87 acres, and that's why. Property zone commercial, we've all agreed on that. Residential uses are allowed in the commercial zone. Front setback is 35 feet, side setback is 15 feet, rear setback is 15 feet. Minimum lot area, there isn't a minimum lot area in this zone. Minimum frontage is 100 feet, minimum green space is 10%, and maximum height is 3 stories or 45 feet. So these are the survey plans that you've seen. This is the updated version. You will see when you look at the plans that we've collected more tree data up in this vicinity. As we build out the road, we're planting gravel wetlands in this area, and in order to navigate the permitting with shoreline and wetlands, we need to know what existing trees are there so that we can do our grids and whatnot. So that's some of the, in addition to kind of detailed topography, establishing the reference line, we also are collecting tree data. Keep flowing through. And that came right around to down here. And keep going. You can see this is where the wetland crossing is. We got all this topography and whatnot is new. And so we're trying to make sure we have good detail through here so that when we set the culvert, it's going to go underneath that road at a future time. It's set correctly. Keep moving through. Yep. So we're planning to extend Mill Pond Lane from Winter Street approximately 1,000 feet with a 50-foot right-of-way, which is the town standard. and a cul-de-sac to the town standard as drawn today. One of the things the dam operator is talking to us about is the town's current standard has the grass island in the middle of the cul-de-sac, and he sees that as an obstacle to potentially getting like a piece of equipment through. It isn't that you couldn't do it, but it would be simpler if either, sometimes you see a cul-de-sac where the whole thing's paved, so there's no island in the middle, and then you can easily traverse right through the middle of it, if that makes sense. Or there's other types of turnarounds that are usually acceptable to fire departments, like a hammerhead or something like that. So one of the things we want to talk to the board and department heads about is sort of options for the end of Mill Pond Lane that would take into consideration the dam operator's concerns of being able to get through there easily. As currently designed, it wouldn't be impossible. If necessary, you could put some like temporary gravel or something in the depressed grass island or something like that. But he's asking if maybe, given the long history of this sort of access to the dam and his interests, if whether the town would consider some alternative that would be better accommodating to him. We'll have to work through that. We build it, ultimately, but we got to ultimately get it approved by you folks. Okay, so removals plan. So we have a deep removals plan showing, basically recognizing the tracks and the buildings, and this is that easement line that comes over down to in here. It's like 50 feet wide. It shows better up yellow on this plan that we're proposing to remove, and then reset it at the end of Mill Pond Lane over the paved improvements to his property. One more. This is just a detail kind of at the intersection of Winter Street. You can see that the existing pavement is being removed, and some trees in this vicinity are being removed to accommodate the upgrade of the road width. So this is the way. This is the layout plan of the road. Again, 50-foot right of way. We have a 26-foot wide road with 11-foot travel ways and 2-foot paved shoulders. And we're establishing a gutter line to accommodate closed drainage. We've submitted a waiver explaining that sort of the deviation between the town standard, which really contemplates an open road section, which isn't really appropriate for what DS's interests are relative to stormwater coming off the pavement and making it into the pond. We're trying to collect that stormwater in catch basins and route it. Let's flip one more. Route it to this gravel wetland here. So we have basically collecting it in pipes and catch basins, both directions, and coming to a common pipe system here into a forebay and through the cells of gravel wetland and outletting it back to the pond. Back up a couple. I didn't hit the fact that we have the 4 lots, right? So there's 4 lots on the north side of Mill Pond Lane. That the plan is for LRCD to partner with Temme Valley Habitat for Humanity to build those out in a future phase. There is an existing gravity sewer line here. We've been working with the water and sewer department. Those manholes are paved over, so we've actually been working with the sewer department to try to get those raised so that we can open them up and get the inverts of that information. It's one of the things that Mario identified needs to be done, which we've been working to do. The plan is to have a low pressure sewer system, which we talked about before. Each property here and each building on the other project will have a septic tank or a series of septic tanks and a individual pump that will pump the effluent in a small diameter force main, and that will be a common force main running to this gravity connection, which brings it into Winter Street. There's also an existing water line stub to access these couple properties that are on Mill Pond Lane. We're planning to upgrade that because we're planning to bring in fire protection, hydrants, so we're bringing an 8-inch line from Winter Street all the way to the end of Mill Pond Lane and eventually throughout the development. The fire department has asked for hydrants every 500 feet, which are not currently shown, but we'll be happy to add those. So we'll be adding hydrants probably at the midpoint, and then here, and then in increments throughout the development. Let's flip one more. So this is the road profile. So this is Winter Street up here. Mill Pond Lane drops as you go away from Winter Street. So this is the gravity sewer line right there. So you can see, gravity sewer only works if you have grade working in your favor. The grade of the property is dropping away from us, so we have to use a force main to bring it back and tie in there. This dark line is the water main that we're proposing. So again, we're connecting into Winter Street with a new water main, and then you can see our catch basins and drain pipes that are collecting into a low point, which is then outletting into that gravel wetland I showed you a moment ago. Maybe one more. Stop me if you have questions, by the way. We also, at the town's direction, there's existing overhead utilities that come in to this distance, and then I think there's a communication line that runs all the way out to the dam. We're removing all overhead utilities all the way back to Winter Street, working with the town's electric department to make whatever necessary upgrades are. I understand this pole here is overburdened and needs to be reworked. We'd be planning to go aerial across Winter Street to a pole on our side and then go underground from there and run all the way the length of Mill Pond Lane and eventually into the development. When doing that, we'll be connecting in all of the existing homes and leaving stubs for the future homes so that they'll have access to that new underground line. One more. This is the erosion control plan. It's basically showing the different BMPs that are going to be implemented during construction to protect erosion and runoff to the river, stabilized construction entrance, catch basin inlets, so there's silt fence in there, perimeter controls, stuff like that. And then there's a whole series of construction details that go through all the drainage and road sections and water and sewer, erosion control, and all the things that would need to be kind of incorporated as part of the development, as well as comprehensive erosion control notes, construction schedule, sequence, turf reestablishment, stuff like that. Any questions or comments?
Did you actually meet with the fire department and the utilities and all these different?
Have I?
Yes.
I was told at one point in time that I wasn't allowed to do that by Fred. And so that's why we deliberately submitted to their mailboxes.
I've talked to two of the department heads, and neither of them received it. So I'm going to ask you to give it to the land use secretary, and she'll make sure the department heads get it. Okay? No department head received it.
Well,
I've spoken to water and I've spoken to fire.
we submitted everything together with cover letters for everybody.
Yeah, I need the cover letters, and we will get them the plans.
Okay, no problem. Would you want that by email or hard copy?
You can email it to the land use secretary, and she will get it
Yes, tomorrow.
distributed.
Okay, no problem. Any other comments or questions? I guess I'll acknowledge that we received the review letter. There's a bunch of content there. We got to work through that. We'll be working on that.
So the items that on the applications at the end of the checklist, there are a number of items that were listed that you had checked off all as pending.
Yeah, all the applications.
Right. And
Yep.
I was under the impression those things you were working on and we maybe would have them before this meeting.
No,
So
it's very premature for me to be filing any permit with DES because we're still talking about logistics of what the proposal is or isn't. And so I need department head input, and I want to incorporate all that input so that what I'm submitting to the state agencies is representative of what the town input wants. Otherwise, I'm permitting something that you guys don't want. So I'm doing, this is a large project, it's complicated, and we're gonna take our time, and,
I just don't know if just giving an application to a department head, he understands. I mean, I would have thought you would have said, you know, meet with the fire chief and go to the site, or you know, stop.
If I had permission to do that, I'd love to do that. I was told by Fred that I was not allowed
Are you
to.
saying Fred, the town administrator?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
We will follow up with the
What's that?
We will follow up with the town administrator about that and get back to you. on
Okay.
that.
I would be happy to meet with each one of them individually or as a whole, or, you know, a year ago, through multiple pleas by us and the planning board, we did have a first ever design review process with each department head and got everyone in the same room and presented the plan at that time. Obviously, the plans have evolved since that happened. And we did get some input, and we can, you know, like, for instance, at that time, they told me they wanted to get it run utilities. So ever since then, we've been showing it. So we have been taking everything we hear and trying to incorporate it into what we're doing. But if the department heads want us to meet with them individually or as a whole, or however the town manager and the town would like, we'd be happy to do that.
We'll meet with the town manager and get back to you on that.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay. Continue. You have more on that?
I don't have any more on this application, unless there's any questions or comments, or unless Kara wants to add anything. Okay.
Does the board have any questions?
Oh, if Frank's here, from Pemmy Valley Habitat for Humanity.
Would you like to hear from me? Yeah?
In just a moment. Does anyone on the board have any questions about what has been presented?
Not at the moment, I don't.
All right, Frank, if you'd like to speak.
Sure. Can you go to the
Frank, I'm going to ask you to state your name for the record and who you're with.
Can you go to the slide that has the cul-de-sac with the 4 parcels? Yeah, perfect. Frank McLean with Pemmy Valley Habitat up in Plymouth. This is what we're looking at, like fantastic opportunity for us to put 4 local families into those 4 homes. That partnership will help to save costs on those, probably around $50,000 to $60,000 each for those lots, really driving affordability into local families. Just for some context, our most recent home will be transferring for $135,000 to that family. So truly affordable. The major burden is relieved by these parcels being donated. What a great opportunity for us to really integrate our programming, which we've been doing since 1985, into Ashland. We've built in Ashland before. I don't know if anybody was any part of that or has any recollection. We built a couple of houses here. It predates my tenure, but the families are making their mortgage payments and they seem to have no complaints. I'm welcome to take any questions about this. The families will own the homes. They will have a mortgage. These are not just given away. They will pay local taxes at the regular rate as every other person in the town. Okay? They are required to perform sweat equity on these homes, so they'll each have about 500 hours invested of breaking knuckles and working with me on the site. I do work on the site 3 days a week, as well as coming to these meetings and doing all the other stuff. And what I can say is that in my experience, these partner families have been absolutely amazing. These are former veterans, they're current town administrators, they're assistants, they work in schools. These are families that are home run families in addition to our community.
What is the timeline, do you think, to build all these 4?
With your help and a whole bunch of volunteers, we'll build all 4 in 1 year. Right? We have the capabilities to do it. But there's a whole lot of ifs and a whole lot of whats and a whole lot of potlucks that have to happen to make that happen.
And this is phase 3, correct?
We've identified it as phase 3, but we've also stated that obviously it can't happen until Mill Pond Lane's built, right? Because that's going to happen first. But we've stated that it's possible that these lots happen before, before that. But it has to do with timing of the work getting done, their timing. They've got projects that are lining up. They've got to complete one before they move on to the next one. That sort of thing. So it's
just for clarification. That's all it says.
Yep.
So so the approval of the subdivision does not necessarily mean this project will go ahead unless the second phase of the site plan gets approved. Is that what you're saying?
Well, like I said earlier, this is the two applications. So this application has nothing to do with the other one. This application is going to be looked at as a subdivision. All we're doing is extending No Pond Lane to make a public street, ending up with the 4 lots and a remaining lot. And that's will be and can be built separately. I think LRCD's plan is, in the greater picture for getting the financing for what they're trying to accomplish, is that they build this phase 1, No Pond Lane, all the way through to Route 3 and the first half of the units at the same time.
Once the subdivision is completed, those parcels would be transferred to Pemmy Valley Habitat, and then we would apply for a building permit, a residential single-family home permit.
And are you a nonprofit that would not be taxed the first year while these are being built?
So they would be, I mean, I'm happy to pay the taxes that they currently are, but they don't get reassessed until the house is complete anyways.
Okay.
So we would pay whatever I'm happy to pay. I'm paying taxes on 2 lots in Franklin for the past 8 years. Not in current use, not being subsidized, we're paying the straight up taxes. And we would, if these are taxed, then we would be happy. Because by law, we can't, unless we're actively building on it, be considered tax exempt on that parcel.
Okay.
We're well versed on that, and we're happy to pay the taxes as required by the town.
Okay.
You know what that will do? It'll hurry us up,
Exactly.
right? So, any other questions? Like when to show up?
Board
with
have
your
any other
hammers
questions?
I guess, on average, what is the family size that moves into these?
The last 3 families have been 3 family members. Yep.
School age?
Varies. Yeah. I mean, I've had some that come in at 8th grade. I've had some that come in at 4th grade. I've had some that have no children. Have some that have preschool.
Is there, like a term, because I know nothing about your program, so I'm sorry if it's a dumb question, but is there a term that they have to stay in the house, or can they turn around and sell it?
There's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm happy to answer any questions on the programming side of things.
Okay.
As far as the selection and whatever, I could fill this for 45 minutes. I don't want to hijack it with how great we are, right? But yeah, there are things that work to protect flippers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like an FAQs thing you could send to us?
I'm sure I could present something.
I'd just be curious
I
to see
don't
that,
because
I'm
I
not real
just-
familiar with it either.
I like to talk, so like,
What was the
I need
question,
an
Chris?
FAQ
What
board.
was Chris's question?
If we had an FAQ of frequently asked questions.
Thank you.
And my office is at the Restore. If you want to come and shop, just come and knock on my door. If I'm there, 3 days a week I'm on site.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, then I would expect that we'd continue this to a future meeting.
Okay. What are you proposing?
To be honest, just with that long letter, it's going into the holidays. I mean, I think it's and you know, you're looking to get stuff 2 weeks before the meeting, which is totally reasonable. I think that, to be honest, I wouldn't be looking at early January. I'd be looking ahead of that. I haven't gone to look to see is your schedule for
So-
135 out?
It is,
Okay.
or will be shortly.
Okay.
It's not published yet, I'm told,
Okay.
but it will be shortly. We're meeting the first and third Thursdays of each month. Okay?
Thursdays or Wednesdays?
Thursdays. It's changing to Thursdays.
That's
So-
January 2nd, January 6th.
So I'm going to propose that, would February 6th be acceptable to you?
I think
And I'll tell you why the 16th of January I'm leaning against, because that is the town deliberative session on the budget.
honestly, I think that if you want the plans 2 weeks in advance, and I think it's okay, but I don't know what you think.
I'm watching you shake your head, are you looking for a longer time?
No, less. Yeah, that's fine. So when was it, February
February 6th.
February 6th.
February 6th?
And I guess, just for the record, our expectation is if the board's talking about our application, we're gonna be noticed that that's happening.
At any other meeting, is that what you're saying?
What's that? Yeah.
Yeah. I think the problem was with the other one, that Mario advised that he could come after the agenda we had already posted, so. But I understand what we're saying.
Yeah, we'll take care of that from now
I
on.
don't know if that's accurate, but that's fine.
Let me do it.
All that matters to us is that if the board's talking about our application, we want to be able to be present, that's all.
We understand.
Okay.
Yep,
Sounds good.
okay. So is the board in favor of that?
Continuing.
Continuing to February 6th? Okay, Paul, are you good?
I'm good.
All right, so continue to January 6th,
February.
February 6th.
Switch plans. Maybe you already did that.
Do you want to meet here?
Yeah, no problem.
Yes, we will meet here.
Did you guys hear
Did you
that?
guys hear
We'll
that?
meet here.
Here.
We'll
Meet
meet
Booster
here for
Club.
the
Here on
sixth.
February.
Yes.
Start. Just start.
Just so everybody's aware of where we're meeting.
So is the board gonna open this
Yep, you
application?
may go.
Okay.
Wait,
Hold on, my dear.
what did you just say?
I asked if the board's gonna open this application.
Are we opening the
Usually the
hearing?
board, like, I don't,
I don't think you heard you.
okay.
I thought this was a continuation of the,
It's still a different application than the one we were just talking about, so it should be,
Okay.
like, process, I think.
Process, we should, with his presentation, we should first open a public hearing for that application. He does his presentation, we ask questions, he comes back, continues the presentation, we
Okay.
continue our questions.
so we'll open the,
We should have done that for the first one.
okay, we'll open a public hearing for this. Go ahead. Does the board have questions? Okay, go ahead.
So this is the Village at Mill Pond. It's proposing a multifamily housing project on the remaining parcel of the subdivision, which is this highlighted area.
This is the site.
Yes, sir.
Can I explain to them being open as two separate applications, and that the entire process of this is to try to accomplish this low-income housing project, and separating it out is taking away from the true intent and purpose of what's going on. I feel it's in the public's interest to see it as one joint application, as one will not happen if the other doesn't happen.
I believe the board will definitely take that under consideration. Mr. Angel?
A second consideration.
Oh, actually, one minute.
I'm
Sir,
sorry,
can
I'm
you
Donald-
state your name?
I'm Donald Stope, I'm a resident in Ashland, New Hampshire.
Thank you.
I'm Matt Angel. I think if you're gonna have a public hearing, you have to have notice. I don't believe your agenda has notice, nor have you put it in the paper. So it might be something that it would be good for you to push off to have notice to the public.
But we posted the agenda at the post office and the town office, and it's posted online, and
Yeah,
it did indicate that Mill Pond was on for
I
tonight.
know, but there's
And-
no
and-
notice in
and
it of a
it was-
public hearing.
Is,
So that's done originally.
Barney, go ahead.
The standard process, at our last meeting, we accepted the applications. The second step in that process is the public hearing. We continued that meeting, those applications to this meeting. We do not have to post again that it is a public hearing, I believe. It's part of the process. First comes the acceptance of the applications, which we did at that last meeting. The next step would be to open the public hearing. but you continue that, and we continued that meeting to this particular date and time. So you do not have to notice the public hearing again.
And acceptance meant accepted as complete, not accepting as in approval.
And that
It
one
was
was
just
published.
recognizing it was complete.
Yes, Matt?
I believe the statute's very clear that you need to have up to 5 days' notice.
It was published in the paper the first hearing, so if you come to the first hearing, then you know it's continued to
I know, but
tonight.
And that was stated at the first
saying
hearing.
that you're opening a new application. Okay, and so this is the first public hearing of the second application.
No.
That was discussed at that.
Both were discussed at the first hearing. Yeah. Both were discussed at the first hearing. Yvette, you wanted to say something?
It just seems like if it was posted.
Can you state your name and all?
Yvonne.
Yvonne.
And I feel like if it was posted as a public meeting for this development, then you'd have more attendance. I always like to look and see public meeting after something that's posted.
Mhm.
And I didn't see that, so I think that a lot of people would be here had they seen that and know that.
Right. We did say that at the last meeting that they would be doing this at this meeting. And that was published in the paper. Like I said, it was stated at the previous meeting as well, that they would be at this meeting.
And the public is always welcome to the planning board meetings, that's why we post it.
As I said to them earlier. Anyone else? Mardine, are we good to go? So go, Mardine is our parliament chair. Go ahead.
So the subdivision is gonna bring water, sewer, and underground utilities to Mill Pond Lane. And we have this 25-acre remaining parcel. So these survey plans are the same plans. We have the same removals. It is worth pointing out, as we know, there's a 50-foot access easement on the west side of the park. The board probably has heard that we received a notice from Fred notifying us that the select board has been talking about this access point and is proposing a potential alternative access solution through Industrial Drive. We definitely think that's something we can entertain, and I think the design team's plan is to reach back out to Fred and maybe try to get on the select board agenda. I would propose to do it as soon as we can figure that out this month or early January to talk about that further, because obviously if that's happening, it changes the design, which goes back to what I was saying before, it changes what I'm presenting to NHDS for permitting and whatnot. It's like these sorts of things are the things we need to be sorting out and getting kind of funneled into a common solution so that I'm submitting for applications at the state level that are actually what we're trying to build. So we've acknowledged that. We got that earlier this week, or maybe late last week, I don't recall. I was traveling. But I expect before the week's out, we'll be reaching back out to the town and trying to figure out when we can get before the select board to further that conversation and talk about logistics and timing, and there's a bunch of moving parts associated with that. As we want to have a good conversation about how that could happen, and with any luck, we can come to some common ground on it. And as that develops, we're reporting that back to you in future plans. So let's skip. So this is the layout of coming off of Mill Pond Lane. We're proposing a drive. This we're calling this the Center Units Drive. Center Units Drive. This is the Southern Units Drive. Right now, we're showing this access drive to the dam over here, and in response to his interest in having larger equipment get there, we're going to flip this dumpster with this access drive, so that this will be a straight shot right through here, which would be an easier path for larger equipment to get through. So in a future version of the plan, you can expect that we're going to be switching that to accommodate his needs. We're also probably going to widen out this radius again to accommodate the sweeping of equipment coming in. And as we move forward, if I'm able to get potential meeting with like DPW or something, I'd be talking to them about this hammerhead, this cul-de-sac, and contemplating alternatives that might be more accommodating to the dam interests. So we're proposing, one more. So we've got the buildings labeled by letter. So we're building in phase 1, we're gonna build Mill Pond Lane all the way here, all the way up and out to Route 3. And then we're gonna build this building, this building, this building, this building, and this building. So it's A, B, C, D, E. So phase 1 would build Mill Pond Lane all the way to here and all the way through 3. And then phase 2 would build the remaining drives, this one and this one. And we build the remaining buildings in that phase 2, which is this building, this building, this building, this one, and this one. And we build the community clubhouse or community room at that time too. Both phases have 38 units. There's 10 buildings proposed on the development. 4 of them are 6-unit buildings. I'm sorry. There's 4 buildings with 6 units that are 2-bedroom. There's 4 buildings that are 8-unit that are 2-bedroom. There are 2 buildings that are 7-unit that are 3-bedroom. And there are 6 ADA units, so that they're flats, they don't have a second story. And they're attached, you see them as like appendages on the end of the building. So that this one, and this one, and this one, and this one are the ADA units. And we're planning to build basically half of them in phase 1 and half of them in phase 2. So we're basically blending in the ADA accessible units in the phasing. So we're trying to have a mixture in both phases. I mentioned that we have a community room, which is going to be 1,000 square feet. It's going to be kind of a central location for community events, education, that sort of thing.
Programming that we provide, within the organization that I work for. We have resident services coordinators on staff that will do programming in that space.
Parking spaces, the regulations require 2 spaces per unit. If you do the math, 2 times 6 76 is 152 parking spaces. We're proposing a bit more than that, 175 parking spaces, 8 of which are handicap spaces. Partly we want to make sure there's parking here where the community room is, because that's going to be a place where people are coming to potentially in and out. There's also going to be a playground of some sort. So again, maybe if you're living up here, you might want to drive down to that. Or if you're driving in from being out, doing errands or whatnot, and want the kids to play, you can drop them off the playground or something like that. We are proposing sidewalks, so we're trying to make it very walkable. The sidewalks kind of connecting all the units all the way through the whole development. We're proposing a sidewalk on the west side of the northern access road all the way out to Route 3. As you know, Route 3 has been improved with a sidewalk improvement project up there, so if you can get up to Route 3, you can walk all the way to downtown. And obviously you get the park also nearby, so we're trying to create accessibility to all those amenities for everyone that's living there. Granite curbing, again, closed drainage systems.
Can I just a question for you?
Yep.
When you go into the phase 1 with the extended Mill Pond, are you doing any sidewalks that's connecting those two?
I'm hearing you, sorry.
Are you doing any sidewalks or proposing any sidewalks to connect your habitat so people can go out safely to Water Street too, or no?
Right now, we're not. That's something that I saw in Mario's letter, and something we will look at. I mean, before I kind of figure out the possibility of that, we're widening Mill Pond Lane towards the river, right? And we're navigating Wetlands Bureau and shoreline permitting, and there's also been, there's been some outcry already that Mill Pond Lane doesn't want to be upgraded at all. And so, if we propose sidewalk, there's going to be more impact. I'm not saying that we're definitely against it. I need to. One of my next steps is with this additional survey data that I've gotten. I'm planning to have follow-up pre-application meetings with Wetlands Bureau and Shoreline Bureau, and kind of walk through where we're at. These plans have been developing a lot, right? And so we want to get to the current plans, show them the current survey, and kind of talk through the specifics of their permitting requirements, And then, once we have that, come back to the board with a proposal, you know, taking in their interest and your interests and trying to find some common ground.
Sorry, I'm just curious.
We've got dumpsters proposed, enclosed dumpsters throughout the development, basically in each pod.
And the dumpsters will have a barrier around them?
They have a fence around them, and if you look at the landscaping plan, you also find that there's plantings around them.
And bear proofing stuff.
We
have a lot of bear issues in this area.
Yeah.
I know they have problems, but that's been a problem.
Yeah, Ledgewood, we have
I
better things.
well understand.
Yeah.
We see.
So all the internal private drives, these are all private drives, they're gonna be owned and maintained by the development. They're 22 feet wide, with the exception of the northern access road, that has the same section as Mill Pond Lane, 26 feet wide. We've got curbing throughout these roads and again, closed drainage, so we're collecting runoff off the streets and routing it to treatment devices and then outfalls that are stabilized. And all that'll be permitted through alteration of terrain. Let's flip into these. So we've got detailed, these are 20 scale plans kind of showing coming off of Mill Pond Lane, showing the specific striping and the buildings and other dimensions, crosswalks at appropriate places so that people can get from one side to the other side. Flipping through there. This area is the proposed wetland impact required to come across the wetland. Because of the grades, we're coming across this wetland substantially higher than the existing wetland. So we're going to have a closed section, we've got a sidewalk, and then we've got side slopes down to the wetland. And we'll be installing a equalization culvert here, oversized, taking into account aquatic organism passage, basically critters that want to get back and forth. We want to be able to make sure that they're still able to do that. If you put it in a little 24-inch cover or something, animals aren't likely to go back and forth, and so it's a concern that Wetlands Bureau is going to have, and we're going to address that. This is what I was talking about a moment ago. So right now we've got the dam access road over here to the dam. We're going to flip these, so the access roads are coming through here. So this will be an easier movement than coming this way and this way. It'll be a straight shot right down through there. So on the next version of the plans, you'll see that swap, and that'll be better for him, and it doesn't really, and probably better for the fire department too to get to the dam. And it doesn't, I mean, it's a change, but it's not going to negatively impact the development. This is showing coming out through the park, which we discussed a moment ago. It's kind of up in the air what's happening there. We'll get before the select board as soon as possible to kind of further that discussion about the possibility of industrial drive. And we do have the traffic engineer tonight, and he's come here from far away. And so we want him to be able to get appropriate time to, but before I do that, do you have any questions of me?
Anyone?
No.
Does the public have any questions? Mr. Greeley?
I'd just like to
State your name, please.
Richard Greeley.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask again, you keep referring to that circle that as a cul-de-sac.
Yep.
Cul-de-sac has no exits. The definition of a cul-de-sac is a dead-end road with no exit.
So what he really means is a roundabout.
Correct.
As we discuss it, it would be a roundabout.
I tend to disagree with that. A cul-de-sac is the end of a public street. And cul-de-sacs have, I know in residential subdivisions, you'll see multiple people with frontage along the radii of a subdivision. So if you're talking many homes, cul-de-sacs, residential streets, you'll come to the cul-de-sac and you might have 3 or 4 houses with drives.
I'm actually agreeing with both of you. You're both saying the same thing. It's just a terminology issue.
Well, a roundabout's a very specific design feature that's trying to accommodate through traffic more than a cul-de-sac. Maybe the traffic engineer can speak to that more than I can, but it is what it is. We are working for town input
Yeah.
on turnaround and trying to accommodate the dam's interest in the turnaround. And we'll modify it however we need to.
And the residents' requirements for movement.
Yep.
Understood. Yes, ma'am.
Kendall, I think I'm getting that part of the use of the term cul-de-sac indicates public road up to that circle, and then the road on the other side is private.
It's private.
Yeah, so there's that difference, is public up to the circle, so in a sense, it's a cul-de-sac of the public road, but then there is a private road beyond it.
Fully
It's a matter of
understand what you're saying. When I look up the
Yeah.
definition of a cul-de-sac, it clearly says it's a dead-end road.
And that's exactly what we're proposing. This is a public street that
The public
dies.
street
It ends. It ends.
Public street ends.
The public street ends, the fire department, the school bus, everybody can turn around as a suitable turnaround that meets the town standard as drawn.
So then I guess to further my point would be, so then we're back to the fact that the traffic from the larger section of that housing all has access to Mill Pond Lane, and again, all to Winter Street.
Anybody with frontage on this road does. That's absolutely right. I agree with that.
Yvette-
Yvonne, yeah.
Yvonne,
Okay, so we're
Sorry.
talking sidewalks and the 50-foot road, and everything's great over there for the new houses, but my house is there. I have 5 feet from my building, my home, to the road. The road's right there.
Yeah.
I have a very short driveway. That street, I don't see how it could even be 50 feet unless you're building on the other side, which, and my sheds are right there. It just seems like, oh, and then my house on the other side is from Winter Street, so I already don't have any frontage or right-of-way. I guess it is a right-of-way, but your proposed, the road is not gonna give any right-of-way for anyone walking or, kids, my kids playing right there. My house is right there, so it affects me tremendously, and and so I guess my other question was, where can I still, I've been looking for the plans online, like on the website, and I haven't seen them. And because I do have a list of concerns
Okay.
that I was going to.
email the land use secretary, and I'm pretty sure we can email a copy.
The problem I have is with our server, Katie, I have a hard time, they're so big.
Okay.
And we,
But she could come get a thumb drive, or I could give her a.
Yeah. Come to the office and we'll get you a thumb drive of them.
I'm upstairs in the
And
town
that will help me, comprise my list of concerns.
who do we go for that? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I ask
The-
the right person.
See this young lady here? Second floor, town office.
Okay, so go to the town offices and just ask for you.
And you were
you'll
there
give me a
when?
thumb drive.
I'm there Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Tuesdays and Thursdays?
And on the second
Till,
floor.
what time?
Well, try to be there like 10:30 to 12:30, but.
Okay, so just a couple hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays?
Right, but you can always email me
Okay.
and let me know, like, if you want to come on a Wednesday at 3 or something, just email
And
me
set
so
up
I
an
know.
appointment.
Exactly,
Thank you
exactly.
so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
I also had a question. I think somebody had mentioned at a meeting that all of our letters were going to be posted online.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's still going to happen
so-
or if
They
that.
have the,
Yeah, if you go to the planning board minutes, halfway down the webpage, you will see October 23rd, 2024. And then next to it, you will see pros, cons, materials, DES inquiries, wildlife, Mill Pond.
Oh.
And just click on those and all the information is there that we got.
Oh, okay. And talking about the survey, do you have a copy of the new survey?
Yes. It was
The
submitted,
planning board has a copy of the survey?
it was submitted on 11/21.
But again,
Is that the new survey or?
Yes.
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 again, our server is very limited at this time. The town is working on a new server thing. So we can't, it's a very large file.
I understand.
Just, go ahead.
Just in that connection, just to make sure we avoid confusion, is the planning board providing the thumb drives, or should people bring a thumb drive?
If you
and
can
have
bring a
stuff-
thumb drive, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Well then, Kevin, I don't have the latest plan set on a thumb drive, though, do I? Is there a thumb drive in the box?
I sent you an email with a link to share file.
All right,
You should be able to click on it, put your name in the email, and pull it down.
perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Sarah?
Yes, my name is Sarah Stoke. I don't know if this is the time for all of my questions, but one of the questions I have regarding the dam and the removal of that with the pond, I feel like this project is expanding even more, and that Mill Pond goes into the Swan River, which then goes into the Ames Brook. And then we're affecting a lot of properties in that downtown area that are along the brook there. And I feel like, I don't know, is this the time for that?
So the dam is a separate property owned by a separate person.
Okay.
They are not removing the dam, they're actually expanding the dam to
Okay.
make power for the town.
So it wouldn't affect the size of the Swan River or the size of Mill Brook?
Correct.
Ames Brook, sorry.
It won't affect Amesbrook or Swan. They're using that to create power. They have, in their deed, they can raise Mill Pond by 10 feet.
Okay.
And that's, my understanding is the max that they can raise it.
Yeah, I just know in the past there's been flooding in that zone and that the town has put in a giant culvert over there. And I would hate
There
to
are actually
see-
6 culverts over there.
Yeah, I know of one giant one,
Yeah,
but thank
and
you for
it
saying.
receives the flooding from the 100 acres above here.
Okay, so with that, whatever works. for the
DES is
dam.
aware of that,
Okay.
and that is part of their permitting process through DES.
Okay.
So we don't have a lot of control over that. DES has
Okay.
everything,
Okay, is this time for open comment on all things or just this?
just this.
Okay.
Matt?
Okay, how would you prevent someone from transiting from Route 3 to cut through this to get to 132? Because I'm seeing this as being an easier route than going up to where we're going right now and back down. So I'm not sure if the roadway would accommodate that way.
As a young lady who's versed with the police department can tell you, it will be the police department.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that they will have signage up that says this is not a cut-through road, private property, and that type of stuff,
My
but
second comment is about that, the cul-de-sac. You would need it to be large like that
Yes.
to accommodate a school bus to do a turnaround like
Yes.
that.
The,
Because it's just human nature for people to park on the edges.
we have
You
a,
take out the center.
we have a
you'll be able to turn around.
17-page report discussing a lot of this stuff.
Okay.
The fire chief has commented on that, and the size that he needs to turn around, not only our equipment, but mutual aid equipment, the buses. He is very knowledgeable about the school and all of that as well. Mr. Stokes.
Donald Stoke. I'm nothing to do with leases, but I'm involved with the Snowmobile Club in here. And I look at where the buildings are situated right now. And in the state of New Hampshire, we have 3 basic levels of trails. We have our club trails that a lot of people use. And then we have our primary trails that connect the major corridor trails. And then we have our corridor trails, such as Corridor 8 that passes through this property. And this is a trail that connects the Lakes region up with the White Mountains onto Canada and out to Vermont here. Corridor 8 comes into this property and goes near where these buildings are going. You'd be able to see on the Hampshire Snowmobile Association's map. This is a very important route for the economic development in New Hampshire for people going on touring and seeing and staying at hotels in the areas. It is routed this way. Some of Corridor 8, which is the rail line, rides alongside the rail, but in this area, for different reasons, the switchbacks and bridges that aren't practical to go this way. This comes through this property, and among other things, I'd like to be assured that our state trail system isn't going to be interrupted. It's a huge industry in this, and a lot of us, I know a lot of us in this room are involved in snowmobiling here. You know, we operate groomers through this area here, and you know, we're all gearing up for this. So how are you going to handle Corridor 8 passing through this property?
I'm aware that there's a snowmobile trail through here. It's been a subject that's been kind of on our radar to, again, when we get to the point where we're nailing down what we're proposing and kind of got things from moving around, to contact the snowmobile club. Is there a,
Yeah.
you guys meet regularly or have a website, or how do we get in touch with you?
Well, we're Squam Trailbusters Snowmobile Club, but this is also Bridgewater Mountain Snowmobile Club. As you can see, here's the mill pond.
Yep.
Here is the trail coming off of the railroad corridor because of the bridges. Mill pond's there. It's circling well into the property here.
Yep.
And you know, we bring through maybe a 40-foot long between the groomer and the drag behind it, by 8-6 wide coming through, you know, on there. And we've got a couple of the operators in the room here.
So you guys can work that out, but I do want to say that a lot of businesses in town do get benefit from that.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Why don't you email me and I can connect you with Kevin?
That'd be great.
Yep.
All right?
Yeah.
At Black Market Site.
I'll need to get your email address or planning.
It's right on the planning board.
On the town webpage.
Town page. So planning board.
All right. All right. Anything else? All right. Go.
I want to introduce Chuck and Dirk from the NAS to talk about traffic.
Yep.
Can you state your name, sir?
Yep.
He will. He's going to give you a card. You have a business card or something?
Actually, I'll leave one.
Thank you.
My name is Jeffrey Dirk. The last name is D-I-R-K. So the camera.
Got it.
Sure.
Got it.
And she's at minute two.
So good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As I mentioned, my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm a managing partner with Vanessa & Associates, and we prepared the transportation assessment for the project. I think as we're talking about earlier on about coordination with the town, we coordinated extensively with the town, and we appreciate the feedback that both the department heads provided to us in conducting the assessment, as well as some of the comments I think that the board had provided earlier on. In fact, the police chief got back to us today with some information on motor vehicle crashes in this area, which is one of the things that we were looking at, especially because I know some of the questions the board has is related to the access up on Route 3. And so the police department, the chief today gave us some crash data, actually going back 6 years for this entire area, so that we can consider that in the transportation assessment. When we do provide responses to the comments from Brown Engineering, which we're working on now, we'll include that information. It wasn't one of the things that they'd asked for, but I think it's useful information as the board is looking at, again, the access points into the property itself. So as we're conducting the project, I know we have two separate proposals or hearings that are going on tonight. As we're looking at it from a transportation perspective, it's one project. So I think it's consistent with, I think, as you were approaching it initially, which we basically have 4 single-family lots, and then we have 76, which we call multi-family units. They generate traffic much differently, and I think the difference is really some of the questions that you've been asking, which is the number of bedrooms that are in each one of these. If you have more bedrooms, it produces more traffic, obviously. Some of the things we're talking about with school kids and all of that is related to the traffic as well. So the single-family homes actually, as a per unit basis, generate more traffic than a single multi-family unit in there. And again, it's just because of the number of bedrooms. So as we're looking at this as a project in its entirety with 80 units in total, 4 of them being single-family homes, what you're most experience is what you have on the roadway during the peak traffic volume hours, so 1 hour, 7 to 9 in the morning when you're trying to get to school or trying to get to work in the morning, and then in the evening, generally between 3 or 6 o'clock in the evening, you have spikes of traffic that are going to happen. The project during those time periods when those spikes are happening on the roadway, it's going to produce somewhere between 37 to 46 peak hour trips. So that's a volume of traffic per hour. Now that's only in a 1 hour period, because a lot of people look at it and say it's 80 units, you know, car going in, car going out, or multiple cars going in and out, and those numbers really don't make sense. Those numbers are only for 1 hour. So if we say that the peak hour, let's say on Route 3, is 7 to 8 in the morning, the project would produce 37 vehicle trips during that 1 hour period. If I slide it and now I'm looking at 8 to 9, it could be 36, it's just not 37. So the traffic is very dispersed throughout the day, but what we're concerned about is the peak of the project added to the peak of the roadway. And then looking at, when we look at that condition where both of those things happen simultaneously, what happens as it relates to how much more delay do I have if I'm trying to get out of Mill Pond Lane, let's say under Winter Street, or Winter Street onto Route 3, or trying to come out the industrial drive, or the access out to Route 3, before and after we've added the project's traffic. So as we're looking at those impacts, what we did see in the analysis that we've undertaken, and this is a full DOT compliant traffic study, and I think as you heard Kevin mention initially in terms of the coordination, we will require a DOT permit because we have work going on out on Route 3. We have coordinated with them. We have not submitted a driveway permit because we do need a driveway permit. One of the reasons why we haven't submitted the application is because what was mentioned in these conversations about where to position the access point. So what we don't want to do is have a fully designed access point and then have it move, because DOT can't issue a permit and they'll just start the process all over again. So we have coordinated with them and they provided us some feedback because of that volume of traffic that I'm speaking about with the 37 to 46 peak hour trips. The project doesn't warrant what's known as a scoping session, meaning Concord doesn't get involved. This is a project that we handled through District 3 because it's more of a local related project because it doesn't produce more regional related traffic of a level that would impact regional intersections. So that's the reason for that. So as we looked at those impacts of delays and vehicle queuing at intersections before and after the project, what we had shown is that delays didn't go up by any more than 10 seconds, and I think your peer reviewer reviewed that as well. Vehicle queuing at any intersections compared to what you have out there today wouldn't increase by more than one vehicle. So it wasn't a significant impact, and as you think about it, if we're generating somewhere between 37 to 46 peak hour trips, it's over a 60-minute period, so not all of it's rushing out like the whistle blows and everyone's leaving the factory. That's not how it works. People, you have different times that you need to be at different places, and so people are arriving, departing, dispersed over that time period, and so that's why it's not really concentrated and resulting in significant impacts. I think one of the questions that the board had is about, how do you assume how much traffic is going out to Route 3 or coming out to Winter Street or maybe going down to Depot Street? So there's a couple of ways that we develop how much traffic will use each of the access points into the property itself. We have existing traffic counts that we performed on the roadway. Those counts were done in July of this year. So they represent peak conditions, which are July and August, and that's what we're required to analyze in the traffic study itself. So we have the existing traffic counts so we can see how are people driving in this area. So we know during those time periods in the morning and the evening, how are people using the roadway network. The other thing that we have is that as you're reporting information through the US Census, you report where you live, so you live in Ashland. You also report where you work. So we know how many people live in Ashland and work in Ashland, how many people live in Ashland and they work in Concord or Manchester. So we use that information as well, so we can say that based on people living in Ashland, these being residents of Ashland, we would expect that generally they're going to work in the same general area. So those employment centers are what we look at as well to determine where do people want to go. How many people are going to Manchester? How many people are going to Concord? How many people are going out to Meredith, Laconia, or working within Ashland itself? And that allows us to then say, once the traffic gets out on the roadway, how many people are going in each direction on these roadways? And then we look at the traffic counts, and that allows us to also make some refinements. So as we look at that information, what it basically says is about 35% of the traffic associated with the project is expected to be generally local traffic. So it's going to be in the Lakes region area. So that's the kind of traffic that we expect will be coming out to Route 3 and traveling to the downtown, heading down to Depot Street, generally considered traveling to the, we'll say to the east to the south of the project itself, and using the local roadway network. So that's about 35% of the traffic. The majority of it, about 65%, is heading out to the interchange, so it's getting onto 93, and then it's going, most of it's going south on 93. It could be heading down to Laconia, Tilton, continuing in Manchester or Concord, based on the census data for people that live in the town of Ashland. So that's how we've come up with the traffic numbers and the trip patterns on the roadway network itself. I'm spending a little bit more time talking about that because I know that the residents, as well as some of the board, has had some questions about, as we're looking at the roadway design, cul-de-sac with the driveway, you know, how many people are going to want to use Mill Pond Lane to get out to Winter Street? So if we're looking at that distribution of traffic and you look at kind of the way the site is designed, and purposely with the cul-de-sac, the way this has been set up is it's a driveway intersecting the cul-de-sac, which right now is a circle in it. And the intent of that really is the 76 units. You can see that the traffic there is really focused and wants to go up to Route 3. And based on that distribution of traffic, that's where that traffic wants to be. The 4 single-family homes probably have more of a potential to head out Mill Pond Road to Winter Street just because of proximity, and it's easy to go in that direction. So a lot of people will choose the path of least resistance and the easiest travel route to get to where they want to be. So if you think about 65% of that traffic heading to the interchange, they're not going to come out Mill Pond Lane to Winter Street to go north to turn left onto Route 3 when they can go directly up the new access point and then make the left turn there and go to Route 3. The same thing coming back. You wouldn't go to Winter Street and then loop around to come into the 76 units if you're coming from the interchange. So the traffic study is based on that distribution of traffic. But what I would also say is that we generally want to plan for like a 10% variation. So we're saying that, let's say my numbers are off by 10%. If we're talking about 37 or 46 vehicle trips, a 10% variation would mean 4 to 5 of those cars maybe wouldn't come in the Route 3 and would use Mill Pond Lane. And I think as you're considering it, as you usually do, you know, weighing the benefits and detriments or looking at those variations that might happen, what does it mean if 4 or 5 more cars end up coming down Winter Street and using Mill Pond Lane from a safety or a capacity perspective? And I think the answer to that is it doesn't affect safety or capacity of the roadways, is, you know, being properly designed as a part of the project. So we did consider that in the transportation analysis as well. The access out to Route 3, there's been some questions about traffic signals. And whether a traffic signal would be needed. Consideration of installation of a traffic signal is based on, there's state and federal criteria. So the Department of Transportation for New Hampshire, as well as the Federal Highway Administration, they have a criteria, they're called warrants. So there's 9 criteria or warrants that you evaluate whether you can put a traffic signal in or not. If you don't meet those warrants, you cannot put a traffic signal in. It's just would not happen. DOT would never approve it, but you should also not be able to find a professional engineer to design it because you are accepting extreme liability if you were to do that. Those warrants and the primary warrants are based on the volume of traffic. And the intent of it is, if you put signals in everywhere where someone would like a signal, you just have traffic signals everywhere along the roadway. So it's really to try to create order and provide some guidance as to where to put a traffic signal in. So the traffic signal warrants, the primary ones, are based on speed and volume of traffic. So you need to have a certain volume of traffic on Route 3, but more importantly, a certain volume of traffic coming out of the side street. And that volume of traffic, just in general, coming out of the side street has to be somewhere between, it has to be about 100 vehicles per hour for each hour over an 8-hour period. So you can see it's a very difficult threshold to meet in order to install a signal. So what the answer is, as it relates to signals, it doesn't meet any of the warrants. So we couldn't even propose a signal at this location. And so we won't be doing that, and we actually can't. The Department of Transportation would not approve it. We just don't generate enough traffic to be able to do that. So we will not be installing a signal, as our analysis has shown at the intersection up at Route 3. Even with looking at July, August traffic volumes, there's not significant delays created at the intersection. If there are delays, it's really for the people trying to get out of the project. Those delays would translate into queuing of about 1 to 2 vehicles. So it's not significant, but I think importantly, as you're talking about speaking with your department heads, what we want to make sure of it on the design of the access, and this is what Kevin is working on, and I think some of the discussions with the town, the select board, is to make sure if there's two vehicles stacked up, the fire truck still needs to get in. So you want to make sure the fire truck can make the swing if there's two cars sitting there waiting to try to get out of the project site. And so that's really the critical design consideration. And I think Kevin has laid out the access that can occur. And I think to the extent that we move over to Industrial Drive, there may be some additional benefits because that's a little bit wider in that area there to be able to create some larger corner radii as well. But that's probably the primary consideration. Lastly is I think Kevin went through the project site and talking a lot about automobile trips, and I appreciate the discussion on the snowmobile trails because that's something that we do consider as well, crossings of Route 3 and where those might want to take place, and crosswalks and making sure we have accommodations for that. But as Kevin has laid out the site, we have a series of recommendations in the traffic study. And you'll see there's two pieces to that. Part of it's the site design, which is, Kevin has laid this out. This incorporates all of the recommendations. Importantly, as I was mentioning, we're not just concerned with motor vehicles, it's the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists as well. So you can see, again, Kevin went through interconnected network of being able to walk throughout the project site, get up to Route 3. There are existing crosswalks out there, so there's that opportunity to be able to provide some linkage between the residential project, the parks, and getting out to the sidewalk system on Route 3. So that's a part of what is being proposed as a part of the project. Bicycle accommodations, also very important. The Department of Transportation stresses mobility, so we need to accommodate all modes of transportation. So as we're looking at the project site, the road is actually wide enough for bicyclists and vehicles to share the traveled way within the project site itself. We have recommendations for bicycle racks. We have discussions about, we have a community house, let's say, or community building within the project. We have a playground. Those are the locations where we want bicycle racks. I know we talked about people driving and parking, and we'd rather have people biking and walking to get to those locations rather than driving within the project site. So again, those are things that will be also, I think, a part of the site plans that we need to do. So that's the end of my presentation. The follow-up that we have is responding to the broad engineering comments. They did ask for some additional data collection out on Route 3 to get volume and speed of traffic. That has been scheduled, so subject to any additional snow that might bar us from being able to do that. We plan on collecting that information next week, so we'll have that. We do make some seasonal adjustments so that to the extent that we have low volumes, we'll be adjusting that. Low volumes can generally translate into higher speeds if we have favorable weather. So I think the speeds might be on the higher side than what we would find in the summer months. But anyways, that data collection is going to be done next week, so that we'll have that. We have the information from the police chief that came in today, and I think all of the rest of the comments are easily addressed. We'll have a response letter back well within the 2-week time period before.
So
start back to Mr. Chairman.
And you'll show us what the consideration is for a turn lane, if needed,
Yes.
and how that will be calculated. Also, in your data, can you include the school uses this during the school year? And we actually have more traffic there during the school year than we do July and August. So could you...
In this immediate area, yes.
Well, in that road that you're proposing. So could you do some analysis on that as well?
Absolutely. Maybe even with the data that we're collecting now, to see if we can somehow look, because now we have some school traffic in it. Not
now, it's really spring and fall. Because that is that baseball field, that is that soccer field.
Good point. I'll see what we can come up with.
And several different school events use that fall and summer, or fall and spring really. Not so much in the summer. It's only Park and Rec uses it in the summer. And
Yeah, let me see what I can find.
That's a
out.
50-car thing.
And I'll have a discussion about that anyways, in terms of what, if we can find some information, that'd be great. If not, I'll add some thought and discussion to conditions that might exist, or how those might be considered in the assessment of the project.
You were saying? Okay. Does anyone from the board have anything else? Any questions?
I can. Will you be analyzing, I know the back side of the road, whether you use Industrial Drive or the ballpark, there's quite a slope.
Right.
So I'm assuming the traffic may change. If there is a storm or something, that there are going to be more people using Winter Street and Mill Pond Lane, wouldn't you assume? Wouldn't you think?
You're talking about depending on the
Depending on the grade coming down. In the original plan, they had showed a switchback, so we didn't have as much of a concern. In the current one, we're showing a straight drop. Has to be within 10%, but even 10% is an issue.
Yes, it can be if it's not maintained, certainly, or depending on.
Well, I'm thinking like what happened on Thanksgiving, what's supposed to happen again tonight. Being a private road, I actually did a tour of private facilities, and the town does a good job maintaining, but the privates usually wait till later on in the storm. So that's why we think that they will use Mill Pond more than that, especially in those conditions.
Yeah, so I think we can talk about that. As I said, it really depends on when that's happening. So like if it happens tonight, there's probably, as you look at it, if it happens tonight or on a time period, it's not during, so if there's a shifting of traffic, it's probably not a large shift in terms of the level of activity. So maybe we want to,
just make a note on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then as a consideration, the same thing we're talking about with the playing fields and such.
Yep. Yes, Marty?
One question, and I'm not sure we have an answer tonight. What, just for sake of comparison, what is the percentage grade of Winter Street?
I was going to say that I don't think that our proposed design is steeper than Winter Street, and I can work on many questions about on that. But I think you're going to find that Winter Street is steeper than our road.
Right, and a lot of people don't use Winter Street in these storms because I literally slide backwards on it.
I know. We're going to have a proper, intersect. Like you're up on Winter Street, hanging on like this and trying to peek around, and we're going to have a proper landing.
Which is why we're saying that they would probably come out, head down to Mill Street to come up and around, which is what a lot of us do.
And move around by Mill out to 132 to come back around, because again, coming out of the ballpark, everyday traffic coming out of there, people are going to realize, hey, I can go out this way, come back around, and still make better time to get to the highway.
Just for you to consider, make a note of it, that's all. Anyone from the board have anything else? Mr. Letourneau?
Thank you.
Could you state your name for the record, sir?
Bob Letourneau, Thompson Street, Ashland. So all of what you just told us is predicated on whether or not you get this new industrial drive rather than the right of way, is that correct?
No, it's based on what we've shown in the plan. Our analysis is based on having a separate roadway independent of industrial drive. What I was saying is, I think there's, what we're saying as a team is there's some advantages to continuing that conversation with the select board to having industrial drive be the axis of the project.
So you know that the Department of Transportation will not allow two access points side by side?
It's a driveway to industrial drive. We have a separate driveway. It's not that they won't allow it.
They won't allow it. I worked for 3 years. Secondly, the right-of-way is not wide enough to put a proper road in with the center line of the right-of-way. They would have to take more of the park in order to build a proper road. So the whole thing is predicated on whether or not you get industrial drive.
I don't know that that's true or not.
You're talking about traffic studies, I'm talking about road building, two separate subjects, I understand that. But it's based on, what you're telling us is we're basing on using industrial drive.
Our traffic analysis is based on a driveway intersecting with Route 3, whether it's industrial drive or as we're showing on this plan, that's what it's based on.
Thank you.
Mr. Stokes.
There's some things you remember a lot, and that when I was 6 years old, I was trying to catch a frog in a pond, and I was pretty shocked when I sunk into the mud and broke a bottle with my foot and really cut it open good. And it kind of brings to mind, this pond that's beside the property, because that's not far different from what I stepped in and found a bottle that I said, how could a bottle be under this mud? But, what's in that mud? Well, Ashland has a rich
So the next gentleman is really the one your question is based for.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay, thank you.
I thought there was going to be an analogy to traffic somewhere in there. I was waiting for it. I didn't think it was going to be good.
Yes. All right. Yes, ma'am.
It seems that the traffic prediction volume is very low considering there's going to be, this is a comment, 175 parking spaces. And the road safety, again, on that side, is probably fine. It's very dangerous for me living this far from the street. I have a very small driveway. The street is part of my driveway, has been since Brown's, I mean, for forever. And I'm on the corner of Winter Street, the Hill, and Mill Pond. So that's definitely not safe for
Right.
me down there.
So they're
And
gonna do
that's-
some arrangements on that as part of this development to change that, to make it much safer. That's in their plan.
I know, but I don't, I'm just, yeah, I guess.
So
I'll-
you're gonna come and get a copy of the plan, and maybe we can show you there. Huh?
Yeah, okay. And again, I guess with the traffic and the roads and the street, I would need some sort of a buffer on my side, I mean, because of this, it's the other side is the river, so I guess that's another whole, problem. But, I also thought about, you know, like there's a big rec department with people coming in and, you know, specialists coming in for workshops and trainings and things like that. And I don't know if that's also considered, you know, as part of the,
So we just asked him to consider the parking rec with the school and all of that. He's gonna make some new calculations for that. Correct?
Absolutely,
and
yes.
okay, yeah, because I was thinking about the rec department that's
Yep.
going to be on site and whoever they have. And do we have somebody doing another traffic study?
So
as
the,
part of this?
the town has hired an engineer to review all of this.
Okay.
That is part of this 17-page report that he's going to answer a lot of the questions.
There's a separate page on the traffic comments in that report.
Yeah, and that, this, after this meeting, this will get posted. Yes, ma'am. Could you please state your name, thank you?
Yes, Sheila Grimley, I live on Mill Pond Lane. I just had a question on the access from Route 3. You said that there wouldn't be enough traffic to constitute light or of such. So when you say that, are you saying that like a light, a regular light, you know, red, green,
Correct.
yellow,
green, yes.
or could there possibly be some kind of a blinking light or something? Because that's going to be a little more traffic than usual coming in and out of there. Or will there be like a signage or something to specify that?
So there will probably be signage as it relates to the project. I don't know, you know, given, you know, to the gentleman's point, given the fact that it's a driveway, they generally don't, DOT, the Department of Transportation doesn't put like those warning signs where it says like intersection head for driveways.
Right.
They would for something like Winter Street,
Okay.
but not for the driveway that's here. And also the same thing, the volume of traffic is not such that they'd be looking at like a flashing yellow light or anything like that. There's more traffic really coming out of Winter Street than there will be coming out of our driveway if you kind of look at it from that standpoint. And so the concerns that you're expressing probably be more so if they were to consider something, they'd be considering it down on Winter Street given the level of activity that happens there versus the level of activity at this driveway. But certainly, to the extent that the department asks that something be done as it relates to the driveway, it'll be a part of the driveway permit, and we'll need to do that.
All right, Sarah?
Yes, my name is Sarah Stope. When do you take a driveway and or a private street, and when does it become so much traffic that it really isn't a driveway anymore, that it's a road? I think that's something that we need to consider due to the volume of residents in this neighborhood. And living in Ashland, you know, I'll take my dog for a walk and cars are flying down Winter Street flying down Mill Street, Elm Street, any of those, and those are kind of sidewalked. And it's just, I'm just curious, I mean, people are creative, especially if they're being a jerk while driving, they're gonna find these shortcuts, get away from the cops, get away from people. So when do driveways turn into a public road? I mean, you guys know I'm right. I mean, I have
So
someone literally
a
stop me.
big portion of that would be that at town meeting, the town would have to vote to accept it as a town road or through the selectmen. There's a whole process that they would have to go through to make it a public road.
So then this potential private driveway could end up falling into the taxpayers' pockets for maintenance if this company were to sign over or like say, oh, we are okay with the town maintaining it and the town voted it in, then it would be an additional expense on the taxpayers for maintaining that property.
But that would have
correct?
that would have to go through the process, and the voters would have a say on that. The same thing with Mill Pond Lane. That is not currently a town road, so it would have to go through the same
It would
process.
have to go through that same process. So
Yep.
the town voters in Ashland will have a chance to yay or nay these streets. And then if this,
That is my understanding.
okay, and then I'm just playing devil's advocate for a second, so correct me if I'm wrong. So Mill Pond Lane, is that considered a driveway right now?
Right now it is.
Okay,
Private road.
okay, okay.
It's
And that's where I
long
guess-
existing for the access to the mill
Okay.
is what it is.
Okay, and so that I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. The difference between a driveway that multiple cars drive on versus a roadway is one is private and one is publicly maintained. Is that correct? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but also a roadway would be designed differently than a driveway. We would never, so if they came to me and said, this is a roadway, then my recommendations as it relates to this would be completely different. Because a roadway is moving through traffic, right?
Yes.
Unless there's a cul-de-sac at the end, but the primary reason is it's moving through traffic. That's not what this is. This is a driveway purposely designed with a series of bends, turns, stop signs, 90-degree angles, because it's not made for through traffic. So
And I guess I know it might not be made for through traffic, but being a person that drives in Ashland all the time, and seeing the traffic that does flow through these different neighborhoods and back roads, it is a concern of mine that,
So you have Google and it tells you where to go and it tells you to cut through this private road.
yeah, and I'm just concerned that I don't, like I said, I'm not educated on the matter. I can read about it and I'm happy to educate myself. I'm just worried about the future of this driveway and the future of what Ashland taxpayers could have on their hands.
Again, it will have to go through the entire process.
Yeah.
One other thing that I talked about to make sure that the data in the impact study isn't like skewed, like you said, it's different with different seasons and all that. One other thing that I thought about right across from where Yvonne lives, there's a dance studio and a yoga studio, and around rush hour, for the people who are coming home into this development, it would be wise to collect some data around that time of day, like 4 to 6 p.m., right at that spot, because even when I was there backing out and the traffic backs up with just the dance studio for a few classes, not considering 180 people. So that might be something to also consider, to include some sort of data on that in the impact study.
So the traffic counts that are done as a part of the project, they do include that time period that you're talking about. We don't look at individual driveways along the road itself. What we look at is the flow of traffic on the roadway. And so the data on the roadway would include the traffic from the dance studios. That's actually in the traffic data.
Great, awesome, thank you.
Yes, Martine?
To follow up on Trish's comment, actually there's more of a problem, not as much with the cars in and out, it's the parking
Oh, it's awful.
of the events in mill number 3.
Yep.
I've seen a
Because there
problem
is no
with
parking.
that. There is no parking, yeah.
There isn't.
So that
It's on the road.
provides
It's on Winter Street.
congestion right at
And your
that,
driveway.
that point. So I don't know I'm not sure how we deal with that. but-
Correct, yeah. There's no,
I don't know.
people, they park on Winter Street and kids are getting in.
Yeah,
You're right.
yeah, yeah.
But that's a local issue.
Yeah.
I have a question. How is the fact if he's proposing the use of the ballpark easement, the town owns that land, they're only using an easement, so how does that impact it becoming a town road? We can't give ourselves a town road, can we?
That is something that will be discussed with their
That might
driveway
be a
permit
legal issue,
and the attorneys.
yeah.
And then, like Ken, I'm sorry for interrupting, but just to piggyback on you, if that driveway were to go through town property, kind of that same, I feel like we're mixing two things with one, calling it a driveway when it's on public town property, even within, I know there's easements and stuff like that, but I just feel like it's a muddy, murky water that Ashland already has enough of.
Good answer.
Okay. Any other comments on that?
Question. So you said Mill Pond Lane is not an easement, it's a road, a private way? Private road?
My understanding is that it is not a town road. It has not been. So
So it's part of their, the
It's
deed
part of-
is part.
it's
is
originally
called
part
an
of the,
easement.
um,
Right.
it is pre-existing for the paper mill from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it's never been well defined. Yeah.
How is it defined on the deed?
I will have to look that up, but,
I couldn't,
I'm-
I was curious.
The town did maintain and
the town maintained it for emergency access for the houses that were there at one point.
however, the town cut brush on that road. They
Yep.
repaved it. They cut trees, they paved it, they sanded it, they plowed it.
As this young lady said, there's a lot of murky water in Ashland.
And then abruptly on November 1st told us, oh, we're not gonna plow it. Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome. Okay. If you are done, I believe we're ready for Mr. Novus. Is it Novus?
Novus retired several years ago.
Again, if you could get a business card to this young lady, Ken? Thank you. Thank
So
you.
good evening, my name is Tim Andrews, I'm with Novus Group. Some of you know me from other work I've done in town, on behalf of town actually. I want to set some expectations tonight, but first, I'm the Director of State and Municipal Services of our Concord, New Hampshire office. We provide multidisciplinary engineering, including environmental consulting and engineering in that arena for site investigations, assessments, and things of that nature. So my role on the project is not directly involved with the project or the application itself. So Novus has a contract with Lakes Region Planning Commission, and my assignment as given by Lakes Region Planning Commission is to do environmental due diligence for this project, to evaluate initially what sort of concerns are present from the data that's available for review, which we've done, followed on with a secondary assessment where we actually start doing investigations subsurface and otherwise. So just want to set some expectations. I don't speak specifically on behalf of what the project is going to do to mitigate any concerns that you may have. I know there are a lot of questions. I may not be able to answer all of them. I can give you my opinion, my experience on some similar projects that we've worked with in the past. But ultimately, some of the questions will need to be answered by the data that's collected and by the project, you know, the engineers working on the project, whether that's us in the future helping them or whatnot. But right now, our role is merely data collection to evaluate what are the existing environmental conditions of the property. So with that said, we have completed a phase 1 environmental site assessment that is an ASTM standard practice through our assignment with Lakes Region Planning Commission. It is basically a research project. We review a number of historic resources such as Sanborn fire insurance maps, tax files, historic files that are on record with the fire department, the planning department, other municipal departments that may have similar records relative to environmental releases or impacts. We also do interviews at this point with the site owner, walked the site with him, evaluated the site as far as took an inspection for what was visible, as far as the conditions, the buildings that were deteriorated out there, piles of existing waste material left over from the old paper industry, things of that nature. Reviewed past environmental reports that were prepared by others, some of them in the late 80s, so some of the information is very dated. But we take all that into consideration, and then we've completed our phase 1 environmental site assessment. So we do no testing during this phase of work. We're merely looking at available data that is an ASTM standard process that the EPA has determined is appropriate, all appropriate inquiry for property acquisitions. So this is standard. All of your banks for commercial realty, all of your industrial users that are buying property, anybody that is getting loaned money on a commercial property that has liability potential typically goes through this process to satisfy the lenders and also to give themselves some liability protection. Basically gives you a baseline evaluation for what do we know about the property with the data that's available and what are the potential liabilities. Through that, we've identified those potential recognized environmental conditions, as they're called, which Brown has summarized in their report that was issued to the town. So just to summarize again for sake of the meeting here, what we observed were improper disposal of 55-gallon drums and other types of containers throughout the property. No obvious liquid releases or anything, but obviously some of the stuff is very dated and old. We have no idea the condition it was left in, what time, if something leaked out of it. Unidentified waste piles in the western half of the subject property, so several of these look associated with former paper making, old pulp piles, things of that nature, but we don't really know. You know, we didn't ask the person that put it there, so we've specified that these have not really been identified as what types of waste streams they came from specifically. The potential use of perfluorinated alkyl substances, or PFAS, which are emerging contaminants, most commonly known, I think, around communities as use in AFFF firefighting foam. So we got reports or spoke with the fire department about this site. They had records of a approval for some controlled burns of the facility down there, and the chief informed us that we don't have records of use, but if we did a controlled burn, it's possible we use foam as a training tool down there, which has led to a number of releases across the state, honestly. A lot of fire departments, other municipalities are dealing with this very issue right now, and there are other sources of PFAS contamination that I won't go into, but it is a concern given the history of burning down there and things of that nature that we can determine. Prior environmental studies.
Let him finish. Don, let him finish.
Concentrations of metals in groundwater that were identified during previous studies. So a previous study had basically installed 4 groundwater monitoring wells and done some sampling for various compounds, and some of the metals came back exceeding the current state standards. Now this is based on one snapshot from one data point. Typically an investigation includes multiple sampling rounds to make sure that there isn't an aberration in the data or to try to establish some type of trend or consistency with the data. So, you know, this is not something that has been confirmed. It is basically one sampling event. But it's notable because there are exceedances of the state standards that have to be considered in the groundwater. Soil contamination in the aspect of there's a significant amount of urban fill, as we call it out here. So there's fill material generated by the industries that operated previously, the paper mill, the rail operation, that typically generate what we call non-point source contamination. So these are basically compounds, polyaromatic hydrocarbons or PAHs that are in ash products that come from district dumping ash out the back door from usually the coal use or other burning. You can find this in coal tar that was related to certain coal tar or coal activities. Other sources such as asphalt that may have been mixed in with, commingled with you know, soil, things of that nature. Metals that were deposited from atmospheric deposition from dust, settling from rail use. So these are not regulated by DES specifically because they're considered non-point source. They're not from a drum leaking that is a release. However, they are consideration for concern because we're talking about risk to a population, and does this pose a risk of exposure, whether by inhalation, dermal contact, things of that nature. There's also been identified previous asbestos-containing materials out here. This is not a specific concern relative to what we do because that's a building material. So, but it is something that has to be addressed as far as the building debris that's out there, because obviously it's a potential access to a hazardous substance that's a health risk. And that has its own sort of regulations that have to be followed with the DES Air Division, which is not who we work with under what we're doing right now. It is something that we identified, the project is aware of it, and it would have to be addressed as part of the redevelopment. So we have recommended, as a result of these findings, performing a phase 2 environmental site assessment, which then gets into the follow-on work. And that follow-on work would consist of the subsurface evaluations that are necessary to further evaluate soil and groundwater at the site. So what we proposed is performing a number of test pits to further evaluate the subsurface conditions, what's been buried out there. Now, we know generally from the information it was mostly coal ash, other sort of construction debris that's been littered about over the years of use. Historically, industries like this, they built in the cheapest area of land right along the river right here because they had a water source, and then they expanded into the wetlands because that was the easiest place to create their laydown areas. So they take all of their unused fill material containing God knows what, and they fill in all of this nice wetlands area to create a much more usable area for their industry. And I've had experience on a number of sites like this, so this is very common. But are there other things that could be buried out there that are of greater concern than just ash, for example, drums and other things that may have been mixed in? So we want to do additional test pits on top of what has been completed historically here. We're proposing installation of 6 monitoring wells scattered around the site on top of the 4 existing wells, so that we can evaluate groundwater and sample all 10 wells in total if we can locate the prior monitoring wells. And that will give us a good evaluation of the soil and groundwater concerns relative to what needs to be managed in the property. Our scope also considers sampling of all of the waste piles out there to do a waste characterization, so that we have a good sense for the project to know what's in the piles, because that's going to be a significant potential financial concern to manage whatever that is, if it's something that is more exotic than paper pulp, for example. All of our work has been done completely in conjunction with New Hampshire DES and US EPA Region 1, since the contract we have is a grant of funding from EPA directly to Lakes Region Planning Commission. So this is completely above board, working with all the regulators as partners as we review this, develop this scope. Everything gets approved prior to the implementation, and currently we're about to embark on the implementation of the scope that has been approved by New Hampshire DES and EPA to evaluate the recognized conditions that I just outlined.
Have you had full access to the entire property?
Currently, I still need to speak with Kara regarding the access, but I understand we were given full access to everything for what we've done to date. And now that we have a proposal as far as the investigation, we'll want to present that to the property owner and be very forthcoming with them about what we're about to do, because once we start looking at things and we're finding things, working with the regulators, there's no going back, right? We've opened Pandora's box, and we want to be very clear that this is done in conjunction and is completely open and publicly available. All this information will be publicly available when it's completed.
Well, how does that work as far as removal of hazardous materials?
So we
are they going to be required to move it, the owner, if it's found, whether they go forward with the project or not?
So at this point, until the property changes hands to the project, the current owner would be found as a liable party because ownership is 9/10 of the law. They own the property, they own all of the liabilities that go with it right now. So if there's something here that is reportable to New Hampshire DES, exceedances, soil, groundwater, something that is a significant risk, that liability falls currently on the current owner. The work done for due diligence, as we do, is basically to inform a prospective purchaser about their potential liabilities so that they can then work with the owner about who's responsible for that. And quite often this gets worked out. I assume the project knows a lot. We've already had discussions about management of soils and things like that that already need to be considered to make the project work. I'm assuming that basically the project will acquire the property with the understanding that they're going to address all these things and they're going to work out a fair value with the owner, to sort of offset what their additional financial responses are. Now, I can't speak to, we find something that is egregiously risky, then the project will pull the plug on this. They have no obligation to move forward on this.
Exactly. But that would be public knowledge as well.
As far as the acquisition, that is not necessarily.
No, I know, but if you were to find something that was outrageous, that would be in your public report, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I was under the impression there were some areas of the property you could not access because of the dense vegetation in some parts of the building.
Well, so
will you be doing that?
We were given total access, and certainly as part of the data gap, I'm assuming you've seen the property or whatever. There are some very dense areas. There are areas with a lot of stormfall or where a lot of trees have been piled up that simply can't be physically accessed right now. So that was a data gap that we have identified to be very clear that we could go bushwhacking over here and remove some trees and you find a whole pile full of drums for all we know if it was underneath some things that were not accessible. But our staff did walk the property to what was accessible to document what was out there. So.
And your ground monitoring will pick up anything that was down through the water.
Yeah, so, if there have been any notable releases, the monitoring well network will, soil sampling test pits are sort of a needle in a haystack. You dig a test pit here, you could find something, you could find nothing because it was over there. So it can be hit or miss.
Right.
Groundwater impacts, go with groundwater flow. So if I put in a monitoring well, over here, and presumably the groundwater flow comes towards the river, which is what we expect. If there's a release of something or a spill of something up in here, we're hoping a network of wells that are installed here would pick that up.
Okay.
I will say that the metals were the only thing that the prior monitoring well network picked up. There were no volatile organic compounds, nothing indicative of petroleum releases or anything like that. Yes.
What's the timeline on the phase 2?
So currently, I just actually addressed comments that EPA has provided as well as DES on our proposal. So that, and we finalized that, and I just got that repackaged, and I need to send that off with our response to comments to EPA and New Hampshire DES to make sure that they are on board with all of our responses. We had submitted also to the Division of Human Resources, Historic Resources, relative to what we plan to do. We have to provide them a site plan because they have to determine if there are any historic concerns, because this is a federally funded assignment. I'm waiting their response as well. So, but I anticipate that we're going to be out there, sometime probably early January at this point.
Okay.
Yes.
So, understanding that there are areas you just could not access, as those do get accessed, and let's say, worst case, awful stuff gets turned up, how does that factor into cleanup and so on, so it doesn't, where it could not be part of the original sort of assessment? And let's say, if a transaction goes through, does that then make the new owner is responsible for that? In other words, if stuff appears where it wasn't part of the report,
Yeah.
how does it not fall through the cracks because nobody was looking at a list and saying it's on there now?
So I will answer that to the best I can, but recognizing I don't work directly, on behalf of
Sure.
the project, right? So, but in a circumstance like this, we already, the project members already understand that there are significant concerns managing the soil out here because of what we've already discussed. So my assumption is they will have environmental support throughout the duration of the project, to help with anything that is discovered that is unexpected. And that those professionals that are involved would then be knowledgeable enough to be able to, work with New Hampshire DES. There's a New Hampshire DES, I call it, it's like a hydra, right? There's a number of heads, there's a number of bureaus, they don't always talk. So Kevin and his team are working a lot with alteration of terrain and on stormwater and other things. In one instance, they do talk is how stormwater impacts contaminated areas, right? So those things will intersect, and we're already aware that there will be significant management of soil to make the project work so that, we can manage the risk relative to the development that's proposed here. So I can say that would be my understanding. I'm assuming
Sure.
you'll have environmental support through this for the construction.
And if stuff turned up in process, are there mechanisms in place where the town would be immediately notified so that we were up to speed and aware of perhaps new risks that might emerge over time?
That's a very good question. So it depends on the nature of the risk. I'm sure that something could be fashioned in agreement for the duration of the project for, routine updates on anything, right? But the town would not necessarily be automatically notified in the instance, say, we had a groundwater exceedance, unless it was something that affected public water supply or was something that was migrating off-site, in which case there are a number of mechanisms that New Hampshire DES uses to notify the health officer of the town, typically. That's typically the contact that gets those notifications. So.
Why is everyone looking at me? All right, any other questions from the board?
Does weather affect your phase two?
Weather affects the cost sometimes. So, but with what we're proposing, because again, as we discussed, the site is not very traversable in a lot of areas. We need to remove some trees to get to where we want to test pit. Test pit's going to be with excavators with, track, they're not going to be affected by snow. We can use drilling rigs that are similarly tracked or are all-terrain vehicles with the drill rig mounted on it, so that we can get into deeper snow or areas where the actual terrain is not very favorable to a truck rig or something like that. So it can, but mostly in the matter of cost and can slow us down. Historically, the past couple of years, we've had some pretty mild winters. This one's starting off a bit colder, so we'll see. I know the Snowmobile Club wants to see more snow this year, so. But yeah, we can work, through the winter.
And that the temperature doesn't affect your movement of groundwater or anything like that?
It only affects the staff collecting those samples.
All right.
That's
No other questions from the board, correct?
Yeah.
Before it freezes.
Matt?
Okay. One of the first things that you said is that the standard of care that you use is one for a commercial property to satisfy insurance requirements. Is that correct?
Yes, not insurance requirements, but financial. So it's basically a way of identifying liability, and it's a standard that the EPA itself has identified as appropriate for any inquiry. So the standard is established based upon, it's a commercial standard, because if not, every residential homeowner would have to do this process every time they want to buy or sell a home.
Okay.
And that's not standard practice, because residences are not you know, they're not generating typically, things that are of a concern for that type of liability.
Well, you're gonna have 4 residents who are gonna eventually be PRPs, the potential responsible parties, that could potentially own some of that liability, and they're unsophisticated buyers. So how is the commercial standard such that it protects those 4 buyers?
You know, that's a great question, and really that's gonna have to come down to how this transaction works with the housing group, and I can't answer that. All I can do is get the data right now, so.
Which is another reason why I would like to treat this as one.
Yeah, yeah. I'm concerned about those 4 people
Yep.
because they're gonna not be financially able. They're gonna have their homes taken away from them.
Well, we have to find out what the concerns are first before we assume what they are. If there is something significant that needs to be managed long-term, what happens is New Hampshire DES will record it against the deed of the property. So you don't need to do a Phase 1 ESA for the standard. You're doing a title search, and it's going to tell you if you have an easement or a restriction on a property. So in this instance, for simplicity, let's say we're leaving coal ash out there, you know, a significant amount of this urban fill material, which New Hampshire DES doesn't regulate. The way that this operated, this was all dumped and placed prior to 1981, which was when our solid waste regulations were enacted. So this is considered a pre-81 landfill. So it's exempt from a lot of things when it comes to things like that. I have a couple other sites that are similar to this. So we've got these urban fill materials that have these PAHs or these ash components, as well as these as metals, such as lead and things like that. They pose a risk, but they're not regulated. DES isn't mandating, you gotta come out and clean all this stuff up, because we would be digging up every urban center everywhere if we did that. So, but what we would do is if we were leaving material in place, covering it over to manage risk or whatever, but this material is still in place, typically what happens is you put an activity and use restriction which designates portion of the property or the entire property with what the restriction is. That it identifies what the restricted use is, why, what you have to do, and that goes against the deed of the property. So somebody comes along to buy the property, they're going to get a title search. The title search is obligated to notify them that there's a deed restriction on the property. So there are mechanisms that are in place.
Partially true. It's not true when you do a private to private sale. You're not
Right, unless you have
required to do
unless you have a
title
deed search. Yeah.
You're not required to do a deed
Correct.
search.
Right.
Like if I sell it to my house to my son, he doesn't need to do a deed search.
Right.
So he would be not notified.
Correct.
Well, and that's, you know, that, as I say, I'm a geologist, not a lawyer, so that gets into beyond a lot of my understanding, but that's where buyer beware also comes into some of this stuff, right? So we can't manage everybody's expectations down the road, we can only do what is within the context of the current regulations. And again, I don't speak on behalf of the project, I'm just here to get the data right now. So.
Kevin, the Habitat for Humanity houses are Phase 3. You would have this done before Phase 3 anyways, correct? Kara?
Well, right now we're planning on, excuse me, sorry, I'm fighting some daycare terms. We would have the remediation done pretty much up front. I mean, that's gonna have to be addressed.
Right, so that is the plan.
So, yeah.
And the houses will be built before they're sold.
So they'll know that before Habitat for Humanity purchases the property.
It's really unfortunate that we're selling property to people that are not sophisticated buyers. I really see this. I've done projects, I've audited municipalities throughout New Hampshire. I've done a project where we've had to go and buy back homes in a flood zone like this. And basically we're taking these people's homes away from them. I'm concerned that we're going to be damaging these people just by locating them right next to a flood area with this toxic contaminant.
Don?
I'm looking at the Phase 1 site analysis, and I remember getting involved in a project where it had no history other than, you know, some farmland there, and the bank made me do a phase 1, and then they were gonna make me do a phase 2 if they ran into anything, so I quickly searched when is a phase 2 required and when is a phase 3 required. And I'm very happy that you want to go to a phase 2 on that, and I would see a project like this potentially needing to go to a phase 3. In fact, I would request that the planning board ask for a phase 3 assessment before approving it, because, you know, we're not talking about, you know, a company we're talking about 100 children running around on this property. When I was starting to get into my, having cut my foot in the pond there, you know, a 6-year-old boy is going to go in this pond chasing a frog, just like I did. And, you know, since 1910, we have had mills here. We've had woolen mills, paper mills, we've had a grist mill here. You know, we've got historic buildings on the site here. And when I searched AI to find out what are the typical toxins associated with the mill history of Ashland, very specifically on that, you know, they talked about heavy metals, which you mentioned as heavy metals. They talk about arsenic, they talk about lead. There's, you know, several other seriously carcinogenic chemicals that are released from, you know, the mills, the woolen mills. They have some dyes that are released on here, and not all of it shows up immediately on there. But, you know, do we want to risk a Love Canal in Ashland, New Hampshire, having kids going into this mill pond? I guess I would like to know what metals you found so far. What heavy metals have you found?
Excuse me, arsenic, lead, and chromium were identified in the prior reports. So.
And do any of those cause cancer or brain problems?
I can't speak to the health. You know, I'm not an expert in that. I do know that they were above the state standards, which the state has identified. Basically, the state establishes the ambient groundwater quality standards that are enacted throughout the state. Those 3 metals were identified in 1 or more monitoring wells at concentrations that exceeded those state standards, and they warrant further evaluation, certainly. Then we would look at what is the risk. Well, nobody's putting in a well to drink the water here. This is all going to be public water supply. So relative to the groundwater, you know, that if we have to acknowledge that, it would have to be managed for as long as there are exceedances out here according to the current state regulations. It would be put into a permit program where the state would receive and mandate sampling and reporting on a frequent basis or regular basis to make sure that that risk is maintained and understood for the duration that it exists. But when it comes to a development like this, and again, I don't speak specifically for the project, but my experience is you manage it to the risk. And if nobody is drinking the water, then that doesn't become a risk that is of a high concern. It is still a concern for the property, but it's not necessarily something that we are going to readily mitigate because people are drinking off of the public water supply that's being brought into the site.
Do you see this going to a phase 3 study?
I think there are aspects, because we already know the soils that need to be managed as part of that. So phase 3 would be basically, so the phase 1 is your desktop analysis that we've done. Phase 2 is your investigation phase. And phase 3 is your remedial planning phase, typically in New Hampshire. Now you can go to other states and the phases are a little bit different, but that's how we consider it here in New Hampshire. So there's definitely going to be a consideration, because the project also already has to consider these urban fill materials as part of it. So I would consider that as part of phase 3. Kevin has to plan for how are we going to manage these materials, because they have to be managed on site. They can't be necessarily hauled off site or put elsewhere without taking it to a licensed facility because of what's in it. There's a risk with what's in it. So there's a certain amount of planning for soil management planning is what we would put in place for that. Other aspects of phase 3, I can't speak to that until I have the data from the phase 2.
So it's something that we will definitely be taking into consideration when our.
Could you require results from all the testing prior to approval?
I'm sure we could.
All of the results will be publicly available anyway, so that's not going to be a problem. Again, because this is done with federal monies right now. Everything is done in concert with New Hampshire DES. It'll all be available publicly. New Hampshire DES maintains what they call the one-stop website, which is a repository of all of the data that they collect and gets uploaded. So once the reports for this are finalized, all of that will be available on the website. If the town wants to copy that, that link or whatever included, all of that is possible, absolutely.
And we've also received a ton of recommendations from the engineer who reviewed this, who recommended us when not to accept, what to hold off for. So we have someone that's working with us to help us guide, because this is really in depth and some of it's out of our contact knowledge. So they've been guiding us on, like, to your point of not accepting or moving on until we have all the information in place that's been requested. So
we got a 698-page report from him with a 30-page summary, which is very interesting reading.
I guess just one of my concerns, my day job is I am a teacher, and so I hear development, I hear, the terms affordable housing or whatever we're calling it, but when I hear that the land has, the metals that you described, kids go out and play, and they're gonna discover things, and they're not gonna be aware of what they're playing with, and I'm just worried about the access to this. I mean, kids are gonna wanna go explore their backyards, they're gonna wanna roam free, and I'm just really concerned for those children getting their hands on things that they don't know about.
So part of the responsibility for the project will be, once we give them the data, and they have knowledge of what they're dealing with, and in part, we've already discussed what they know what we're dealing with, and I've already discussed this with Kevin and others at the project team, they have to mitigate that risk. So, and again, this is not regulated by New Hampshire DES for those specific things, like the stuff that we talked about with preservative fill material. However, it is a liability risk to Lakes Region community developers, right? To the development. It's for exposure. They don't want to bring a new population in and expose them to things that are known health risks, even though there's no obligation regulatorily to address these. So the project will have to be designed to consider how to manage these to mitigate the risk. Again, I talk about mitigating risk. You can't always just get rid of it. It's not financially feasible. We're not living in a world where everything is pristine and we can just go out and build on virgin property anymore. We've run out of it. So a lot of what we're doing, what I'm working on, is mitigating, identifying the problem so that we can mitigate the risk with that, right? In this instance, that comes with grading those areas where this material exists, for example, isolating it with geotextile cover or something like that, and importing clean fill material over the top of it to isolate it, 2 feet, and then putting an activity and use restriction on top of it with a long-term soil management plan to identify for anybody that picks up this property in the future, here's what you're getting, here's what you're obligated to do. So that will have to be incorporated as part of the design.
I don't know a lot about your profession and how you survey the land out there. When you are digging for your samples or getting your samples, how far apart are your samples from one another?
So that really is dictated. Right now, our assessment is fairly broad because we don't know what we're entirely dealing with. If we find something that is a source of potential contamination, that's where the assessment would sort of hone in on that, sort of target in. Right now, we propose a fairly broad assessment of 10 test pits across the site, recognizing there's been a number of other test pits done out here historically, and we've taken that information into consideration. And then a monitoring well network that will, 6 new wells across the entire site.
How deep are the wells that you dig?
So the wells will go that depends on what we're looking for. In this instance, we really are only looking to get into the groundwater, top 5 to 10 feet of groundwater. There are contaminants out there that, you know, would warrant us putting in deeper wells, but to start with, we look at the shallow groundwater, which is the most accessible, and as far as vapor intrusion and things like that. So we got wetlands, we got mill pond. My estimate is we're going 15 feet with these wells. It would probably have, you know, 5 to 7 feet of groundwater in them, depending upon the time of year.
Is there any concern for the town water aquifer for the town wells?
No.
There's no
It's
consideration?
outside of that district.
Passed? Okay.
Sarah, the state of New Hampshire takes these three metals and the PFAS very seriously.
Okay.
They have sent the health officers and building inspectors to go take specific classes on these.
All right, so they're kind of dictated on.
There's very specific rules and regulations, and they're
Okay.
very, very strict.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you. And thank you for taking my question.
Sure.
I'm a little hard of hearing, so maybe the question has already been answered, but perhaps the people in the room here would like to know. Once you have identified these issues, obviously you have more research to do. What is the protocol for the state and federal EPAs? What is the protocol between you and them?
Well, so my protocol begins and ends with the assignments that I have, right? So, you know, for all I know, we're going to complete the phase 2 environmental site assessment, and I may not be involved. But the New Hampshire DES, again, this has been completely transparent, working with them to date. They've seen the phase 1 ESA, they know all of the things that we've observed, they've commented on our approach to this. They will receive all of those results. If there are regulated issues related to this, if there are soil conditions that exceed regulatory standards, if there are groundwater concerns that exceed regulatory standards, New Hampshire DES will know and have that information on file, and they have an obligation then to send a letter notifying the current property owner of their liability and that they're directly responsible for addressing this. So that's how this would go down. And then, you know, typically New Hampshire DES would work with the property owner works with their consultant, and, you know, sometimes it's a negotiation or whatever, but it's working within the confines of our current regulations in order to, again, address the contaminants of concern relative to the risk and come up with an appropriate remediation approach that mitigates those risks for the given circumstance.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate that. One last thing that I wanted to add to is the New Hampshire DES will probably be working with the federal EPA.
So they are, so in the EPA, with what I'm doing, they are getting copies of everything that we do as well. However, I will say that EPA defers typically to the state regulatory programs who are really managing this. The brownfields program we're working under, EPA is really, the program was founded under the auspice of taking an underdeveloped, underutilized site such as this because of perceived or actual environmental issues, in providing these evaluations such that it removes or at least identifies the issues associated with it to help get it back on the tax roll. What my job is really to evaluate these issues so that we can take a site like this, which is not being utilized or benefited by anybody at this point, as I can tell, and it's really, right now it's posing as big a risk as anything because everything is completely exposed and unmanaged out there. And it helps get these back on the tax roll or into a beneficial reuse that provides economic benefit to the community that's served. So that's really what the function is. That's what EPA's function is here. They will provide some comment, but they will let New Hampshire DES take the lead because long-term, EPA is not going to manage this site. New Hampshire DES is going to be responsible for overseeing the regulatory framework for this.
Thank you, and I hope that helps.
All right.
But
Donna,
I'm trying
did you
to
have-
understand how that process will work. Thank you.
Yes.
I was just wondering, it's just a question, is the mitigation for cleaning it up the same for residential with all the young children and the families and all that? Or is it different and it wouldn't be as much of a problem to clean it up if it's going to be something else?
So that's a great question, and generally in New Hampshire, we have one standard for everything. In other states, Massachusetts, they have industrial and they have residential standards. So we don't have that in New Hampshire. New Hampshire wants everything to be pristine. We want to be able to drink our water everywhere. We want to put a well in outside. We started to realize that that's not practical because of our urban centers and these other issues that we discussed with PFAS and everything. But so it's really, New Hampshire has one set of standards. Now, we still need to consider the risk associated with that, and the project needs to associate that with the risk and make sure that, again, because there are some things that New Hampshire DES will not, they don't have jurisdiction. Again, they're urban fill materials. I've worked on a site before which was a former apple orchard down in Londonderry, and they're taking all the old apple orchards down there, unfortunately turning them into housing. What comes with apple orchards? Lots of pesticides, right? Which of course is everywhere in the shallow soils. And I went to New Hampshire DS to consult with them, and they specifically told me we don't have jurisdiction. And I can't really advise you on this, but if this were a regulated site, here's what we would make sure that you took care of to give me some guidance. So there are certain areas of exemptions. However, it behooves the project for their own liability protections to follow those same standards to address these things, whether or not DES has jurisdiction or not.
Okay, I need to wrap this up because we're after 9 o'clock and it is now snowing. So these are the last two questions.
So just to make sure I'm clear, there are two forces that drive acting on fixing stuff up, and one is the regulatory policies that are in place, and the other is the risk of the property owner of getting sued if they don't clean something up and there are kids and they get really sick.
I mean, those are two, that's, in general terms, yes, those are the two things that are in play here. And a responsible developer will take their own liability, responsible developers take liability very seriously, right? And they're going to mitigate those things because they don't want to get sued. I can't speak to, there are irresponsible developers out there who would turn a blind eye to certain things and
Okay.
cut corners, but.
Last question, Matt.
You said that the deed restriction is going to be what protects the property owners, but who's going to monitor and enforce those deed restrictions to make sure the property owner is doing what they're supposed to be doing? Is it DES? I'm not sure if they have the jurisdiction to do that.
I mean, if it's a deed restriction on an activity use that doesn't require any long-term monitoring or management of it, it just goes against the deed and it's basically a notification.
It's registered with the...
So it's up to the owner to make sure that they're...
If there's groundwater contamination, there's a groundwater management permit that would be issued for the site. So, I know, so Ashland has one for their landfill, right? We're monitoring. So to monitor regularly groundwater quality and make sure that it is understood what the, what the conditions are of the groundwater and that those conditions aren't changing and that's not migrating outside the boundaries that have been established with that. And that is overseen directly by DES on a regular basis. So the restrictions really, again, it comes down to what do we find out here? So I warned you, I don't have all the answers because we're still doing the information gathering here, so.
Alrighty, so time being late, we need to wrap this up. Any final comments from you?
None, but I'm sure you'll have me back after we complete.
Sure we will. Any final stuff from the board?
Yeah, we can ask for the impact studies.
Yeah, the impact studies are public anyways, correct?
No, the fiscal impact
Oh,
studies.
that's later. I'm talking with him first. Are we all done with Novus?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. You got here early. Does the board have anything else for the applicant?
Not tonight.
Tricia, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was wondering, we were talking to Brown Engineering about some of the requested impact studies. Would it be possible for you all to provide a fiscal impact study to the town? In addition to the one that Mary Moriarty provided for the school, there were some gaps in the school study that would probably be a financial impact to our town beyond that. And then for like infrastructure and other things, we could get a list, and we were wondering if we could get those from you all.
Yeah, look, to answer, yes, we were planning on getting a fiscal impact study. I will say we were under the impression from the October 23rd meeting that that was going to be part of what Brown Engineering was going to be supplying. We had asked a question, we brought up the fact that we didn't think Brown Engineering was capable of doing a fiscal impact study, and we were assured by the board that they were, so we were operating under the assumption that that was.
So there was a misunderstanding there, which I believe has now been corrected.
Yes, I will say, based on the email conversation we had yesterday, we understand that that is not forthcoming from Brown.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Okay, so yes, we will get an impact, a fiscal impact study.
They will review what you provide,
I see.
but they will not be performing the assessment.
Okay, that was.
Which is contrary to what we discussed before.
Correct.
It is.
Correct. That's right.
And
That's right.
so we were waiting for them.
Right.
So we weren't, if we had known.
Understood.
Understood.
We
There's
wanted to move forward.
miscommunication there, we
Totally
understand that.
understand. Yeah, but we do need
The
it.
school
Okay.
impact, the school study that they gave, you have a copy of that, correct?
Yes, we were
Okay,
provided.
so
that
it does not include quite a few things.
But that was from Mary Moriarty.
Right, that was only for the elementary school teachers. It does not include anything to do with the high school students. It
Right.
does not include anything to do with the building project that the school will need to do.
Okay, so,
Right.
I'm hearing you would like fiscal impact study that includes school findings, including the high school as well.
So yeah, so you can, if you could use Mary Moriarty's initial assessment as a base, there's just some gaps that the school, we had a school board member come and present and talk to us a little bit about what Mary created.
Could you convey what you want specifically
Yes.
in the email?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we will do that. Well, we will probably work in coordination with the school board, and we can make sure that you all are, and we can make our requests very clear.
That'd be great.
I expect that the professional we end up hiring is going to be contacting every department individually and getting specific information.
Yeah,
To be
we'd love
able
for
to-
you to use what she created, just because she put a lot of work into it. If
The,
you-
the school,
Well, honestly, yeah, absolutely.
yeah, the school impact is actually a very good one for what it covers.
Right.
Yeah,
It's just there's stuff it didn't cover.
right.
So I trust we're going to continue this hearing.
Are you requesting a continuance?
Well, you're not approving the project. So the appropriate next step would be to continue it to a date certain in the future.
February 6th?
I will make the motion to continue the public hearings on both the subdivision and site plan applications to February 6th, 6:30 in the Booster Club?
You're right here.
Okay.
So we just have a comment on that.
And I'll just note for the record that that's going to be past the 65 days.
Yes.
So we, the applicant, need to agree to that, and we are
That's
amenable
what I was just asking.
Yes, so we are amenable to that extension with the understanding that we are hoping there'll be a decision on February 6th, and our agreement to an extension is till February 6th. Thank you.
So, when we have a second on the motion, we have an agreement on the motion. Any comments on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
It should be noted in the minutes that the applicant did agree.
Yeah, and you will be getting us all those things that we've requested in advance.
2 weeks.
That's the plan.
Hopefully.
And if something, I mean, I can't tell you right now that something, a water impact study or a physical.
Right.
Will be basically reporting back to you that we need more time.
Right.
Possibly.
And that's fine.
But we'll strive to pull that off.
Correct. Okay. Anything else? Does the board have anything else?
She does.
Was the November 25th meeting recorded?
Yes, November 20th. When was that?
Video.
No, it wasn't.
No, it was not.
We weren't there, I completely missed it, that's my fault.
A lot of people did. Okay.
But the minutes are quite detailed as to the points that were discussed and the concerns and so on. So even if it wasn't recorded, I think Paula captured the kinds of issues that came up in a lot of detail.
All right, Jane is working on getting together the charrette, so we're gonna start with that. In January, she's gonna have a lot more information on that. She's contacting Mr. Dorset. We did find an issue with some building regulations that weren't updated, and that is now being taken care of online. And we also found that there were some more places where the zoning board regulations were incorrect in different places on the town website. So those are now being taken care of, just to report back to you all.
One concern I had, the planning board page on the website used to have all of the regulations and applications listed on that page, in addition to the forms and documents page. They've all been taken off that page.
Really?
Yes. There's not even a note to say, for all the regulations and applications, go to the forms and documents page. They used to all be listed on that page.
Any idea when they moved?
No, the site plan, regulation, subdivision, lot line adjustment, master plan are all still listed here.
Not on the planning board page.
It is. It is, I'm on it. I'm on it right now. It's right there. Those are what you're talking about, right?
No, click on one of those. Click on one. Does it go over now to the forms and documents page? No, I'm not talking about the master plan. I'll check it again.
You say when you click on the link, it doesn't move, it doesn't
But that's something that I think we need to check on.
Okay, I will work on that. Yeah, it brings right here, the whole site plan process.
Okay, I'll look at it again. Yeah. Another question, the schedule for next year, meeting schedule for next year, when's that going to be ready? Will that have the submission date for applications on it also?
I haven't even started, I was so focused.
Okay, because we're going to need a submission date for January, real fast.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. The submission date is usually 21 days before the first meeting of the month.
December 18th, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I will try and do it Thursday, so.
No, it's done. We don't have to motion that.
Anything else? Have a good night. Enjoy the snow.
I'm stiff.